This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate fourth part of What If Naruto Destroyed Madara's Great Plan. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. But now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The alliance to free Wind from Danzo and his Firemaster's oppression was surrounded by extremely strict security. It goes without saying that the elderly disabled person had spies in Suna and had even persuaded some nobility to support him. However, Kase no Kuni ordered the treaty with Cloud and Lightning to be divided because he knew there were traitors among his people. He and his organizers understood that the treaty could wait to be made public until Danzo was sufficiently worn down and Hai no Kuni was preoccupied with other matters. Danzo knew, on the other hand, that his spies inside Suna and the Kase no Kuni daimyo's court weren't perfect. He had other agents keeping an eye on any Wind Country units that were large enough and close enough to him and his men to manage this risk. However, Suna had to move relatively little in the early stages of the Wind and Lighting Alliance's plans because it relied heavily on the two Tails borrowed Jinchuriki to decimate Danzo's peacekeepers. He and his men were taken aback by the early acts, which were compounded by the treaty's secrecy and the deployment of borrowed troops. And so in those first few weeks he lost more men than he could afford to. However, as they say, no plan endures communication with the enemy. The entry of Konoha's own heavy hitters in Team 7 into the fluid situation in Kase no Kuni, and their subsequent successful capture of Kumo's Jinchuriki, was a major blow to Wind as Danzo suffered a reversal of fortune. The fact that it occurred so close to the scheduled date of Cloud's offensive operations against Leaf in Rice Country increased its impact. This upset threw a huge wrench in their plans to ensnare Hai no Kuni in a hopeless and brief multi-front war, as it became evident to both the Kazekage and his daimyo that Danzo wasn't weakened enough, or rather, Suna had lost enough nin to no longer enjoy a decisive advantage over Konoha's peacekeepers. All of them had their plans ruined in the Land of Wind by the chaos of war. However, a war leader is an adaptable thinker who doesn't give up easily, and for this reason, the Wind daimyo gave the order to organize the hurried attack on Danzo that included samurai and shinobi. The necessity of removing Danzo and his men for strategic reasons and the need to maintain face in front of the daimyo's allies in Lightning made the decision inevitable. Naturally, it is impossible to move such massive groups of soldiers covertly, so there were very evident plans for operations in the regiments surrounding Danzo's camp and inside Sunagaku, which were monitored by spies who were always on the lookout and reported back. Team 7 waited by the tent's sole entrance at the back of the 20-person seated assembly while Danzo briefed his commanders and advisors. Upon receiving the summons, they had questioned why they had been invited. They couldn't think of any other reason for the cripple to ask them to attend a meeting than as a sign of loyalty, but minutes into the presentation, it became evident that this was not the case. Early in the morning, reports of Iwa's impending invasion of fire, Kumo's troop movements in Rice, and Suna's assault preparations had all arrived within an hour of one another, and everyone realized the seriousness of the situation facing Hai no Kuni. As you are all aware of Kumo's cooperation with Wind in the provocative actions that the latter carried out here in Kase no Kuni, we are forced to draw the conclusion that they will attack this camp in the coming days given the preparations we are witnessing in Sunagaku and the samurai units surrounding us. There is no question that the opposition's seeming strength in this instance is misleading, but 3 samurai regiments backed by a shinobi detachment against a unit our size in numbers is an adverse correlation of forces against us. It is important to remember that our opponent is dispersed. He's dispersed his forces all around us, and the nin complements currently affixed to his forces in our area are not particularly formidable. Danzo said, aiming to see how the members of Team 7 would respond. This gives us a brief window of opportunity where if we move quickly, we can defeat one or more of his units in detail or escape before the trapdoors snap shut around us. But in contrast to Danzo's expectations, Team 7's position didn't even slightly change as a result of his announcement. Nevertheless, the elderly cripple momentarily met Naruto's gaze and gave the blonde a nod. This leaves us several courses of action that I'll now list. Our situation is bad enough that we cannot ignore the latter as an option, he continued, baiting Kakashi's students once more. Perhaps they agreed with him, or perhaps they refused to take the bait, Danzo could not tell. For the first option, we simply hold our ground and wait for the enemy to bleed out. If we stand our ground, we will fulfill our primary mission parameter of protecting Hai no Kuni from any military adventures by Kase no Kuni. We have enough rations to withstand any siege for 4 months, but we will be overrun unless relieved. However, the longer we hold out against Wind attriting their forces, the better it will be for our main war effort against Iwa and Kumo. Ultimately, though, regardless of how the war plays out on other fronts, if we are not relieved, our camp will be overrun and we will be killed. We withdraw to Hai no Kuni second. Of course, if we take this approach, we will have to fight and subdue the samurai regiment that is defending our rear. Once we are in fire territory, our internal supply lines will be protected, and we will be better able to keep our homes safe from our adversaries. Even then, though, we won't be getting many reinforcements due to the circumstances on the other front. It is imperative that we take into account the possibility that the Wind Daimyo could utilize the news of our retreat as propaganda to strengthen his position and undermine the support of all the noblemen who oppose his policies in the event that we withdraw. Our honorable allies won't be able to withstand Kei's no Kuni's army without our help, and I predict that they will be destroyed in about 6 months. As a result, we will face formidable adversaries on 3 fronts, endangering our war effort. Now that Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura have captured the foreign help and defanged those treacherous bastards some, the price they extracted was only enough for a partial payment. There's still plenty left to repay for the things the sand vermin did to our comrades, and we can get our own back if we move quickly. Third, we go on the offensive. These Suna bastards have killed our men these last few weeks with their Kumo helpers with impunity. We can, however, forget about the security and safety of our camp if we choose this course of action. There just won't be enough time for us to defeat one of the regiments and come back here to receive assistance. If we manage to repel their attacks, we might not have the strength to do so because we'll be exhausted from the battle and tending to our own injuries. Once they obtain the pertinent intelligence, the enemy will recognize this and attempt to engage before we have a chance to regroup. On the downside, of course, our actions will open the door to Hai no Kuni and Konoha for wind and sand. On the positive side, we can use the journey to recover our strength as we don't want our allies to see us weakened. It might give them the impression that we're no help, and if enough of them believe thus, they might decide to turn us over to their daimyo and use us to purchase their return to his fold. That being said, in order to deny the enemy the opportunity, we'll have to abandon our base and head elsewhere. Ideally to the territory of our noblemen allies. Fourth, we can give in to the gentle mercies of Wind Daimyo. It goes without saying that we would have to be idiots to select the last option, and even if it were a possibility, we would not. It also lets me set foot inside Hai no Kuni's borders before the end of the 4-year term. Personally, I prefer number 2. It saves our necks and ensures that most of our strength will be available to Konoha to fulfill whatever need may arise in these troubled times. Let those hypocritical, self-serving bastards try to put me to death when they need my men's strength and me to save their ass together. When the officers considered their options, there was a brief silence. Danzo-sama, Naruto said, if I may say a few words. You can proceed. That's the main reason we're here, the man said, giving the boy a suspicious look. The men in the room enjoyed having their voices heard, even though they weren't from his brainwashed units. There was enough animosity between the Danzo's own loyalists and the Konoha loyalists inside the camp that he was hesitant to bring them together. For political reasons, the former had to pretend the latter did not exist, but fights between individual members of the two units frequently broke out, usually with New Leaf recruits starting the fights. And he wanted to keep Team 7 away from his personal troops until he was certain of their commitment to his cause. Naruto gave a nod. One piece of intel that our observers seem to have missed is that the wind regiment between us and fire is not combat ready. They had a breakout of the flux and remain weak. One of the seated officers turned to face the blonde sitting next to him and inquired, "And how did you come by this information?" With a wry smile, Naruto cheekily shot back, "A little bird told me." The fact that he contaminated the wind regiment's water supply did not need to be known by his allies. The outcome of his sabotage was the only thing that needed to worry them. After that, speaking to everyone, obviously, I can't reveal my sources and risk compromising them. But I've independent confirmation from separate sources on this subject. The regiment, I will go so far as to say, is combat ineffective. Easy pickings. They won't put up resistance worth a damn if we have a go at them. Danzo questioned, sensing that the blonde wasn't quite done, but, as he tried to figure out how Naruto was attempting to influence the group's choice, a number of scenarios raced through his mind. But I'm not sure if such a course of action will serve us or Konoha best. Iwa, Kumo and Kusa are going to be pressing the land of fire hard. If we cannot secure Suna's support or failing that, neutrality, we'll be beset on all sides, and with such odds stacked against us, we'll probably lose the war. Thus, what happens here, in Suna, over the course of the next week will determine whether we have any chance at victory or not. And by extension, what we do here will save the land of our fathers. Think of the glory and honor and loot at our feet. It's to be had if we can only dare. Danzo gave a solemn nod, and as his officers turned to face him from their seats, his eyes searched over them. The expressions on their faces showed that at least a few of them were giving Naruto's words some serious thought. However, the elderly war hawk had other plans, and he wasn't going to allow a young dog's naive hopes of fame and fortune to steal them all. No, part of Danzo's plan was to invade Hai no Kuni as soon as possible in order to guarantee the nation's future and assert her dominance over the other emerging countries. Because who could have predicted how that inept and bumbling Kakashi would manage the war? The old warhawk thought it highly likely that Minato's golden prodigy would lose everything because he allowed his emotions to rule him. Which was just not acceptable. Danzo was certain that he was the dynamic leader Konoha and Fire were looking for, someone with the guts, conviction, and moral fortitude to make difficult choices. He gave in, conjuring up his own persuasive rationale. Chunin Naruto has the right of it in that the next few weeks are crucial for Hai no Kuni's very existence, he said. The fact that the blonde got to play the maverick and he just needed to promote conservatism, a philosophy that all ninja were deeply familiar with, made his job much easier. But we'll be no use to anyone if we throw away our lives in a mad charge. So, unless there's a purpose to striking into the enemy's heartland, I see no choice but to preserve this command and retreat. Sure, we'll be abandoning Kase no Kuni to the Suna dogs, but we'll at least be alive to guard the gates of fire from the barbarians when they come against us. And that, I think we can all agree, is where our duty ultimately lies. Live and protect the land of our forefathers. A few cops nodded in agreement, and Danzo grinned to himself. As usual, wisdom and experience transcend youthful exuberance. Danzo. Sama is right, Naruto bowed sincerely. Actually, he believed the traitor was mistaken, but he wanted the man to believe that Team 7 supported him and that their disagreement stemmed from their desire to further the old cripple's agenda, a desire he did not share. Indeed, Kakashi's pupil wasn't going to be above it if the blonde's suggestions were able to subdue the man's defensiveness through flattery. I agree that none of the fine men in this camp should die needlessly. As it stands, their expertise is essential to the survival of our country, and I'm not asking anyone to give their life in vain. However, I implore you to think about this. One disease-ridden regiment guards the retreat route, but it is unable to obstruct our escape. 2 regiments with medium-sized shinobi who are ready to be plucked stand in front of us. If you move fast, you can hit one of them, evade the regiment that is attempting to intercept you and the blocking force that is already in place, and reach the safety of Fire's borders, where you will be bolstered by the units that are currently on guard there. You would have gained great glory and wealth, upset the balance of power in Suna, and undermined the Wind Daimyo's authority with just one act. Everyone will be talking about you as Fire Country's savior, and the daimyo himself will owe you a lifelong debt. You keep saying, you. A shinobi officer who had not spoken up until now said, "What are you going to be doing while the rest of us are attacking the samurai?" With a predatory grin, the blonde turned to face his teammates. They returned the favor by shooting back seraphic smiles, and he turned to face his questioner. Although the man was a seasoned veteran and did not recoil, several other shinobi did. This was because Naruto's smile had the edge of a cold-blooded killer considering massive violence. With Danzo, Sama's permission and blessings, the 3 of us are going to Kase no Kuni's capital to meet the daimyo. After taking a sip of water, Jiraiya extended his canteen to the scout in front of him. Report? When the latter had quenched his thirst, he inquired. Send a supply train of 7 wagons 2 miles north, escorted by a shinobi squad and a platoon of samurai. I sensed that none of their ranks contained a strong chakra. I suppose they could be hiding it, but I highly doubt it. The Toad Sannin nodded, understanding the scout's assessment himself. His unit hadn't been in the field long enough for the enemy to begin bolstering security in their rear, so he gave the issue some thought and came to a decision. He'd attached himself to the 3rd, slightly over, strength platoon, intending to use it as the official reserve while catching whatever enemy forces escaped his minions' clutches and killing stragglers of the invasion force. The Sannin had soon after divided his company into 3 platoons and sent 2 ahead to operate deeper within enemy lines. He addressed the group of young shinobi surrounding him, saying, "We'll ambush them at the turn of the road. Mind you, I want Iwa prisoners. Before sending the 2 Iwa Jinchurikis to Konoha, we will gather intelligence on them." Kusa.nin, what about him? Someone inquired. Make no special effort to imprison Kusa. Iwa's Jinchuriki were on the Sannin's mind as he spoke absently, worrying about Stone's strategic weapons. These shinobi were the same ones that had fought against Konoha in the previous war, and working together, they were known to be incredibly skilled tacticians and ferocious fighters. Jiraiya had no doubt that age had only made them more dangerous, and in this war, With the forces of Hai no Kuni stretched as they were, the Iwas-tailed beasts had to be neutralized at all costs, and he certainly had to hold them back for at least 2 weeks while Kakashi moved heaven and earth to gather enough soldiers to form a line in the rear. What happens if they fight? Jiraiya's eyes became icy. Kill the backstabbing vermin. With a scowl, Kakashi studied the report on his desk. It was days like these that he wished he had never taken on the position of Hokage and all the duties that went along with it. On his desk was intel that Kumo's troops in Rice were being reinforced in a big way by Cloud and Lightning, and he did not need anyone to tell him that Wind and Sand were acting up on their side of the border. Perhaps because they sensed something they took for weakness, the pricks at Stone, Rock and Grass had marched their troops into Hai no Kuni itself. Worst of all, from Kakashi's standpoint, the Iwa Kusa alliance had assembled their troops without Leaf gaining cognizance until it was too late to do anything about the massed troops. It said much of the magnitude of Konoha Anbu intelligence group's failure that even at this late stage in the game, they could only make guesses as to whether the Iwa Kusa alliance simply wanted to grab some land while Fire's attention was divided between several other enemies, or they planned to overrun the capital and wipe Fire off and Leaf off the map of the elemental nations. Certainly, the long-running enmity between Stone and Leaf was bitter enough that the latter was just as likely as the former. Either way, it was clear that the Land of Fire faced the gravest danger to its existence in the 80-odd years since the formation of the hidden villages. The basic issue was that Hai no Kuni's and Konohagakure's force levels had been determined over the previous 10 years based on the assumption that, in the worst-case scenario, Fire would have to fight Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri. To counter this threat, the plan called for establishing supremacy, or failing that, standoff capability through parity over the Mist Navy. In the last 3 years, Hai no Kuni's navy had been strengthened with a healthy dose of talent from T and Wave, and significant fleets along with sizable ninja garrisons staged in those 2 lands to make Kiri reconsider before undertaking any foreign adventure. Since Fire, Rock, and Lightning were all on the same continent, any war with them would have to be fought on land. In light of this, Hai no Kuni and Konohagakure prepared for a 2-front war against Iwa and Kumo by building up their nin and samurai units during the 3 years of peace that had followed Fire's annexation of T. It was widely believed, and rightfully so, that Wind's neutrality would be maintained to the greatest extent possible, so no one had taken Wind into account when making strategic decisions. In retrospect, it was obvious that ignoring Wind was a grave mistake, given that Kei's no Kuni was one of the 5 great elemental nations, but the tanks had grown accustomed to the former following the Suna Otto affair. This was an all-too-human failure, and his people were going to suffer greatly as a result. Which brought us to the current mess. How could Fire, with surface forces designed for a war against 2, win a war against 3 of the other 4 great elemental nations? Unfortunately, time travel jutsu hasn't been developed yet, or I would go back in time to kick my own ass for being foolish enough to accept Sarutobi's seat and wring Jiraiya's neck for talking me into it. But since there was no such technique, all he could do was push forward as hard as he could, which meant determining how to exact revenge on Kumo for their aggression in Rice. Sinking their commerce on the seas was too great an escalation, the Godem decided, and would quite possibly push them into pursuing action on other fronts. Such a reaction would stretch Fire's forces even further and was to be avoided, nor could Hai no Kuni afford to simply ignore Lightning's actions in Tea and Rice. Fire had to show the other weaker nations their faith in their own strength during this crisis, lest the smaller Fry 2 sensed allied with the Jackals and start nipping at Hai no Kuni's heels. Above all, he had to find a place to fight the Iwa Kusa invaders. He had no idea how he would accomplish that, but he had to if Fire was to have any chance of surviving the war. Maybe. As Sarutobi greeted his guest, "I hope you had a pleasant journey, Lord." With a friendly nod to the retired Hokage, the Fire Daimyo settled into his plush seats, much preferring them to horse-drawn carriages, and his guards silently withdrew behind the wall to join Sarutobi's people in their vigil. "Thank you, it was," the Daimyo replied, grinning, adding, "We had no problems during our march, and I'm really glad about that. Even a year and a half ago, T was far from being as peaceful as she is now. Hello no Kuni owes you and your men a debt of gratitude, Sarutobi." "Grateful, Lord. Your remarks greatly honor me and my men. Here in T, we were extremely lucky in the beginning of our rule. When 2 of the 3 main import grain stores in the country were destroyed at the beginning of the uprising, the previous regime committed a grave mistake in judgment. As you are aware, the majority of T's food grains are imported, so it would have been disastrous for us to have disregarded the needs of the populace like the rebels did. Rather, we took the sting out of the insurgency and it lost strength much earlier than anticipated by bringing in huge loads of grains to stave off famine, beginning road construction programs, building and repairing dams, spending enormous sums of money on shipbuilding programs, maintaining law and order, cutting off the resistance's seaborne supply routes, shielding our allies and the neutrals from the enemy, and launching retaliations whenever we had solid proof about the guerrillas. Even so, it is well known that during the first 2 years of the programs, when we lacked enough hulls to regulate the incoming supplies from the sea, it was a near thing. The daimyo gave a nod. Even so, I'm very glad that tea is peaceful today, because the situation developing inland is worrying in the extreme. Extremely so, Lord. In particular, I find the events in Wind and Grass worrying. Kusa's change of allegiance and the two tails capture? The daimyo inquired. Sarutobi gave a solemn nod. Setting a tailed beast free is a very dangerous development. The fact that they sent their Jinchuriki to Suna shows how much they cherish their newfound bond with Kei's no Kuni, even though I would have assumed they would have preferred to have her closer to home. If you put it that way, it does sound very ominous, the daimyo admitted. Perhaps we were amiss in sending Danzo to Wind 3 years back. Sandame, who was retired, shook his head. It had to be done to avert civil war, Lord. Yeah, I guess. Kusa, too. We'll address them when the time is right. Should the war end successfully. The daimyo gave in. I'm inclined to teach Grass a lesson that'll live long in everyone's memory. Sarutobi replied, we will, but then grimaced and said, there's something else that I wanted to talk to you about. Though Kakashi needs to know as soon as possible, I couldn't take the chance of this information getting out because there are spies in the area. Oh, it's about Danzo and the Uchiha affair? Conan? Yes, Nagato. We're going monkey hunting. Watch officer, the telegraph stations are not responding, reported the on-duty technician. With a plate of sushi in hand and a vacant expression on his face, the station's watch officer, a shinobi with the rank of Special Junina, came up to the technician's desk. All elemental countries had a small but rarely used telegraph network connecting the capital and the largest few cities and towns. The network was fast, but wasn't as secure as messenger birds or shinobi carriers. In Wind's case, the casualties caused by the Yondaime Kei's ill-advised adventure in Fire Country were compounded by the havoc subsequently inflicted by Danzo's peacekeepers, weakening the shinobi corps too much for them to guarantee effective internal lines of communication while pulling their myriad of other duties. The pressures on Suna had thus forced the daimyo to expand the telegraph network on a temporary basis despite the fact that it was more open to outside interference. But when Danzo's goons ignored the wires month after month, even as sand shinobi running those communication lines were pulled somewhere, some bright soul somewhere decided that the tree-hugging idiots did not realize the network's significance and significantly expanded the scope of the program. Now, 3 years into the occupation, while the most sensitive communication was carried by messenger birds and ninja, pretty much everything else was relayed on the wire. Those same relaying stations were not responding to status checks now. Do you not believe it to be an accident? He inquired. The tech gave a headshake. Not so much of the network at once, sir. The commander nodded. The clever person behind a desk who had chosen to rely so heavily on the network had failed to see that although you could rob Peter to pay Paul and pretend everything was okay for a while, you eventually had to pay the bill, and something told the Special Junin that this was happening now under his watch, which was just a camel's cock. Never give up on re-establishing contact. Send maintenance teams along the lines, escorted by teams of 2 ninjas Chunin rank or above, to make repairs and keep an eye out for any potential sabotage. Please let me know if there are any updates. Yes, sir. Because he was a commander and had to maintain composure in front of his subordinates, the commandant turned away from his subordinate station and summoned 5 vultures, murmuring his report to them and sending them away to report higher up. Then, he sat down and pretended to enjoy his sushi, comforting himself with the knowledge that there was nothing more he could do to influence events further than perform his duties to the best of his abilities. 2 of the birds took off towards the capital, while 3 of them made a direct course for the units defending Danzo. This was in case the foolish people hadn't noticed the telegraph network's breakdown and hadn't made arrangements for whatever the cripple had in store for them. After hours of walking, we haven't come across even one tree hugger. You'd think that after the recent events, the one-eyed prick Danzo would become more security conscious and up the patrols or something. Kakuzu froze in the morning twilight, glaring at his partner. The fact that Hidan's complaint was exactly what he had been thinking a few minutes earlier did not make him any less irritated with the freak. He would murder the fair-skinned worshipper of death as soon as they'd completed this mission successfully and reported it to the Akatsuki leader. Kakuzu smiled, thinking that it wouldn't be long now. He would use the death fetishist to whittle down the leaf shinobi numbers and then hit the psychopath from the rear. The smile positively lit his face as he imagined walking into a pigsty to serve minced hidan. He hoped it was a reinforced patrol because then they'd have wiped out 2 large teams and fulfilled the mission objective to weaken Danzo's garrison in wind. Hopefully, the idiot the higher dot-ups threw at him the next time would be less annoying than the scumbag who worshipped Jaishin and his predecessors. The sky was partly obscured by light clouds and the smoke from the adjacent city. Light traffic was already moving on the merchant highway to the capital of T, though daybreak was still several hours away. This told much about the health of the insurgency and how well the T was integrating itself into fire that the merchants were accompanied by a very small security contingent. And apart from a few isolated pockets, this was pretty much the entire state of T. The sight confirmed what Payne already suspected. The insurgency in T was dying, if not completely destroyed. Even so, Payne's heart ached to do what he was about to do, but grief could not stop divine will. The road to eternal peace lay just beyond his grasp, and today he would take the world's first step in that direction by apprehending retired Sandaime Hokage. Conan, we strike at dawn. Early in the morning, Team 7 departed Danzo's camp with the first scouting party, whose main task was to protect Danzo's soon-to-be departing main body of troops from ambushes. Sakura's patrol route for the first hour of Team 7's march matched theirs closely enough that she'd chosen to join them for a portion of the march. Since the other team of killers was still out there hunting leaf shinobi, it was only prudent to assist the scouts as much as possible. The group of 10, consisting of 6 scouts, Team 7, and their newest addition, Liaison, though he remained silent, Danzo needed first-hand information about Team 7's activities for his own purposes, and he also saw the political mileage in having one of his men take part in the attack on Kei's no Kuni's capital back in Fire Country. They set out in 2 columns, each 100 yards apart, led by the scout team's 2 trackers. Liaison, as was to be expected of one of Danzo's own covertly trained killers who had been carefully concealed from Konoha's notice, had no name other than what was assigned to him for the duration of the mission. In this case, his name reflected the role he played. Realizing that Danzo was trying to test their loyalty, Team 7 hadn't responded to the revelation as required by Danzo's banishment. Because the scouts were under Team 7's protection, Sakura and her teammates were on the outer, exposed column, and she purposefully let her chakra leak as bait. If the killers were close, she wanted them to zero in on her location so that they could deal with her while the scouts were under Team 7's protection. The expected attack occurred on the 57th minute of their march. The fact that it nearly caught 4 seasoned, chakra-sensitive shinobi off guard was a credit to the ambushers' skill, though not surprising given that they were Akatsuki. If Hidan had been of sound mind or tactically inclined, he would have thought to question Kakuzu on the wisdom of the decision and accuse him of gross stupidity. There was no point in giving an enemy any breathing space in any engagement, much less an ambush, and in any ambush, one started with one's deadliest weapon, which in this case meant Kakuzu as he was the long-range ninjutsu specialist of the 2. However, since the Jaishin disciple was neither, he did not ask Kakuzu to spring the ambush in the morning twilight. Hidan, a close quarters fighter, attacked with a textbook slash intended to decapitate Sasuke while Kakuzu watched from his own hiding place. However, the coup de grace did not quite go as planned because Sasuke had not released his chakra like Sakura had, and the Jashin worshipping madman from Yugakure was unaware that his target was Uchiha trained for speed. Once the latter had cleared his hidey hole, Sasuke sensed Hidan and swung around to face his executioner, grabbing Hidan's weapon just under the blade, killing its swing in a movement so smooth Leaf's own taijutsu experts Guy and Lee would have struggled to carry out. Before Hidan could react to the unexpected action, a lance of lightning carved Akatsuki's only death fetishist from left hip to just under his right shoulder. With a bewildered expression on his face, Hidan collapsed to the ground in 4 fragments. A hand, a blade, wielding arm, a portion of his body consisting of 2 legs, and the remainder of his body consisting of his head. As it was, Sakura had to kawarimi him out of the way of Kakuzu's Zukoku, and a river of fire hot enough to melt sand to glass roared through his position, so Sasuke was unable to enjoy his first Akatsuki kill. As Sasuke narrowly avoided a horrific burning death, the scouts withdrew even farther as Naruto and Liaison both Leaf A and B's with the inborn instinct to always go for the kill, though one was a deformed caricature trained by the exiled Danzo charged Kakuzu. As a form of retaliation for the blonde's carelessness, a dozen appendages shot out of the sand, grabbed the member of the Akatsuki group by the left leg, and tore it to ribbons, sending Naruto hurtling to the ground in a splattered mess before exploding into smoke. Naruto had arrived ahead of schedule. The blonde exploded just inches from Kakuzu's fist, throwing the Akatsuki member some 30 yards away and allowing the bolt of lava liaison shot at him to pass through empty air. Kakuzu realized he'd been tricked, and he turned in time to block another Naruto attack, but it was doomed to fail. In mid-air, Kazuku cursed his own ignorance and short-sightedness for landing him in this situation. It was obvious to Kakuzu that he had miscalculated the threat, and thus that loser Hidan was effectively eliminated from the fight until he could be re-stitched. The mercenary knew that this was not likely to occur before he dealt with the Konoha, so he was left to face not only 4 experienced shinobi, but also 6 others with unidentified abilities who were holding themselves in reserve. His only comfort was that he had faced such long odds countless times before and he was still alive, something that could not be said for his opponents. His anger rising, he released all 4 of his heart wraiths, saying, "This just isn't my day," muttered quietly as he landed on his feet and anchored himself with his left hand. He was going to enjoy killing these little fuckers almost as much as he was going to enjoy feeding Hidan to pigs. The Akatsuki agent was about to fall when one of his wraiths reappeared with him, giving him the gift of its heart, only a moment after a ball of compressed chakra shot at high speed blew apart Kakuzu's true chest, pureeing his heart in the process. Have you noticed that? When one of Kakuzu's wraiths approached him again, Naruto was taken aback and got to his feet, swatting away a blow that could have killed any man. What was going on in this world that a simple Rasengan to the heart could not take the life of a motherfucker? Luckily, the blonde was not so immobilized that he was unaware of the powerful lightning attack, Gion, that a heart wraith had unleashed on him. A short while later, he found himself in close proximity to another of Kakuzu's wraiths, which was aimlessly meandering around like a drunken fool fooled by Sakura's deceptions. Attempting to stab it in the chest, he was met with a powerful stream of water that shot out of its mask, from which he narrowly managed to escape. He muttered, "So, the stupid things can feel pain," conjuring up Kage Bunshin and dispatching them to help distribute the information to the others. Now that they'd run into the guy, it was clear that he had some unique abilities and was too powerful to face alone or in a team if they could not find out his vulnerabilities fast. He identified the enemy as Kakuzu, a longtime Akatsuki member, from one of Kabuto's debriefs, but the file had been lacking in details regarding the missing nin's capabilities. Then, one of Naruto's clones switched places with Sasuke, and the Uchiha materialized next to the real Naruto, Sakura and Liaison following shortly after. "Naruto, what is that?" "I was in the middle of a fight," Sasuke growled. He'd killed his first Akatsuki, damn it, and he wanted a piece of the second before the scumbag got away. "So are we all," calmly answered Naruto, "and for the time being, my clones can handle things. I wish to share information about this idiot. What then do you possess?" "Apart from the fact that you already removed him and he is still standing," Sakura pondered. "Well, let's see. He can split his body into multiple parts, is susceptible to genjutsu, and I've seen the bastard use high-level attacks involving fire, lightning, and water. I can infer from the efficiency with which he performs them that he naturally connects with each of these components. That is absurd." While processing the information from his clones, Naruto formed more Kage Bunshin and sent them in to take Kakuzu from his flanks. "Okay, maybe not," he shot back, just as a massive blast of wind and fire exploded out of the battlefield. "He also makes use of wind. In any case, causing pain causes genjutsu to lose its wraiths in the same way that it would a human. Sadly, stabbing them in the heart does not result in their death. When I stabbed the person who uses water, I learned this. Maybe 5 hearts, but Naruto's Rasengan took out one of the enemy's 5 independent chakra circulatory systems at the beginning, assuming their anatomy is the same as ours, which I highly suspect," Sasuke observed. "He currently has 4, one for each of those items and one for the genuine one. Regretfully, we are unaware of the location of the wraith's hearts. If we eliminate the other 4, then maybe we can kill him," Liaison thought. "That sounds a lot like a strategy. Even though we're not sure how to defeat the wraiths, we already know how to destroy each chakra circulatory system individually. Though it would be ideal to eliminate them all at once, we are stuck with what we have," Naruto remarked. All 3 gave him a nod. "All right. I'm going to throw myself into the fight with Sasuke now. Sakura, while we engage the bastard up close, you and Liaison will strike him in the flanks. The idea is to repeatedly isolate the real one and stab him in the heart 4 more times. The Wind Capital is the main mission right now, but I would like to take an Akatsuki prisoner. I swear to you all that if it seems to be failing, I'll blow the place up. That should kill the bastard," though it may sap some of my chakra for the primary. Kakuzu was beginning to feel a great deal of hatred for this day. He realized that he was going up against Itachi's brother, Konoha's Jinchuriki, and other random people, some of whom were skilled. This put him in the unfortunate position of being buried in smelly shit, something he'd never experienced before. He contemplated throwing pride to the wind and running like hell, leaving his other 3 surviving hearts as a sacrifice, but there were too many freaking blonde bunchins running around. And God knew how many of them were the exploding kind. For that to work, and even if it did, he doubted if he would be able to outpace the Jinchuriki and Itachi's brother. When he heard the familiar screech of yet another of Kakashi's infamous techniques, the Chidori, close quarters, it was all the warning he needed to break free from that thought pattern and throw himself out of harm's way. That is, until a ninjutsu arcing with electricity ran him through his heart at that very moment. His attacker released the ninjutsu and switched places with a clone, which was crushed by one of Kakuzu's wraiths that arrived too late to save its owner, but still managed to merge with Kakuzu and bring him back from the brink of death. Kakuzu used his threads immediately, forming tentacles and swatting at all the nearby clones, while his 2 remaining wraiths formed a defensive line to guard his back. With fire, wind, and lightning, he cleared the neighborhood, which was becoming a little too crowded for his liking. It was now evident that the Jinchuriki and his allies used a lot of bunchins to anchor their enemies' attention while the real ones took potshots from the sidelines. 2 of them were ninjutsu and taijutsu experts, the third used Iwa molten rock techniques, and the last was a genjutsu user and a close quarters fighter, as a punch he'd received early in the fight proved. Well, he was their better by 100 years and he could play their game far better than they could. The aged Akatsuki member swung into action, creating several hundred ordinary bunshin and disguising his wraith's appearance. The bunshin charged everything in sight, causing a wave of explosions to sweep the landscape as Naruto's clones blew themselves up, taking many bunshin with them. Taking advantage of the confusion, Kakuzu moved slowly in Hidan's direction. When he was 15 meters from the madman, 2 bunshin ran alongside him. Believing they were his own, he allowed them to get close, only to have the left one explode in his face not 5 feet away. Using his tentacles to protect himself, he barely had time to think that the other bunshin might be dangerous as well. Finally, a kunai punctured his heart. The clone hanged as Kakuzu's wraiths attacked him right away, blowing itself up as the wraiths got close enough to fight at hand. One wraith stumbled from the explosion and was hit by molten lava from the flanks, instantly setting its mask on fire. The final wraith reached its target, Kakuzu's body, and merged with him, only for Sakura to appear Kawarimi behind and smash him harder by her termza in the ribcage. Bones broke at the raw power evident behind her blow, and Akatsuki's controller struck the desert ground so hard that there was a small explosion of dust and dirt. Sakura instantly turned away after hitting her target in the back. This was not a reaction to any other threats, rather, it was a reflex. She was, and always would be, an expert ambush fighter, adept at using the element of surprise to turn the tables on her unsuspecting target and running before anyone could catch her. In this instance, with Kakuzu lying lifeless in a shattered and bloody heap, there was no enemy to fear. Rather, good habits on the battlefield saved or lost lives, and this was one good habit she planned to keep until the day she died. From a distance, Sasuke gave his teammate a compliment, "Great shot, Sakura," and they locked eyes. Sakura shot him a smile, telling him that it felt good to smash the Akatsuki agent's chest to mush. Her group was interested in securing Jinchuriki, and anyone who wanted to kill Naruto deserved whatever punishment they received, even if she wasn't entirely convinced that he and his friend were to blame for the team's massacre. Observing the small conversation from a distance, Naruto turned to face Liaison, who was the person closest to him. "You too, Liaison," Naruto said, praising the man. Then, recognizing the scouts, he gave them the all clear, waving to their commander. "I think that takes care of the local vermin problem." The scouts had watched the fight from the sidelines, prepared to step in only in case things went really wrong. As per the previous agreement, "You can now release your team. These bodies will be bagged and sent to the Konoha intelligence group." From a distance, the scout leader nodded and proceeded to galvanize his team into action. After they had moved a few hundred yards, Naruto grimaced and pursued Liaison, who had already begun looking for the first Akatsuki agent. He said out loud, "I'll help you with this one," as he caught up to Danzo's skilled killer. Naruto thought it was intriguing that the man was familiar with Iwa's molten lava techniques because not many people had access to them, and he was certain that Anbu intelligence would be curious to find out how the elderly cripple had managed to obtain even one. The head of Akatsuki threatened, "I'll gnaw your bones and bask in the sweet oblivion of your death agony. I'll kill you all and drink your blood. I'll do that." The first attacker's body, which Sasuke had neatly chopped into 4 pieces, was quickly found by Naruto and Liaison. However, instead of finding a bled-out corpse as they had anticipated, they encountered animated body parts, which was incredibly unsettling. Additionally, the minced meat began to make obnoxious threats. Naruto could only imagine how much of a pain in the ass the thing. He refused to call it a man. Must have been before it was chopped up. Why are these people so damn stupid? The blonde complained aloud, stuffing a rock into Hidan's mouth and breaking a few teeth in the process. As Hidan mumbled threats, Naruto stood up, kicked the bastard's still animated hands away and ranted. Yeah, he and his teammates knew Akatsuki were ninja boogeyman, but reality was even the greatest ninja were mortals who had to die someday. These Akatsuki seemed to be the exception to that rule, and Naruto was seriously annoyed. There were plenty of folks like the old perv Jiraiya, the old Hokage Sarutobi, and their own master, Kakashi, who could be said to deserve immortality. But they were not, whereas the murderous scumbags in a mercenary group bent on world domination were. I mean, Sasuke cut you into 4 pieces, asshole. Can't you die taking that as a hint? How in the hell are you still alive, let alone talking? And why are you moving your hands? What the devil is wrong with this world and with your fucking hands, too? Oh no. Stomping on it for good measure and kneeling next to the head so he could look the thing in its eyes, Naruto shook off the freak's left hand, which was attempting to grab onto his legs once more with a glaring anger at the world at large. For a piece of flesh and bone that was barely more than a palm and 5 fingers, it sure was annoying. You freak, I don't know what you are, but I'm kind of glad you can communicate. When Konoha Anbu gets their hands on you, I'm sure they'll be even happier. If you don't have a lot of information to share, they will still accept you. Ideally, you will. OMG. Do you want the body parts to be bagged separately, Nagatsu-san? Liaison inquired. Naruto gave a nod. Yes, I do. I wouldn't rule out the freak recovering or doing something similar in the wake of his partner's rebirth mojo. Liaison nodded and went to work, while Naruto followed Sasuke and Sakura to inform them of the good news and to see how they were doing. It was getting close to midday, and he wanted to get to the Wind Capital by the latest. The sound of a lone rooster's crow echoed through the Tea Capital's gates, waking a few light sleepers. Of those few, a handful set out to face the bleak morning light, and a bare handful fixed their eyes upon the great walls encircling the city, becoming the first civilian witnesses to the Akatsuki leader's lone assault on the city, witnessing the vision from hell of a huge crab with weird eyes smashing part of the fortification to smithereens. The militiamen manning that particular section of the wall were the first casualties of the attack. They were by no means the last, and by the end of the day, they would be joined by several more. Old age brought insomnia, and Sarutobi was no different. The retired Hokage had gone to bed at midnight and woke up 3 hours later. He then, as was his custom, spent the next 3 hours at his desk going through paperwork and writing letters. As a result, he was wide awake and aware when Pain's summon attacked the capital's walls, while most of the city garrison was asleep. Koi, the elderly man, called out to the leader of his guards. Yes, Sarutobi. Sama, Koi said, stepping forward in a shunshin in front of the former Hokage. There appears to be an attack on the city. It had only taken a quick peek out the window to determine that the explosion was not the result of an accident or an act of a strong, inebriated shinobi escorting the daimyo to a secure location. Send someone to make sure of that. Koi nodded. Before he responded to the professor's call, he had sent someone for the assignment, anticipating that order. It's done, Sarutobi. Sama. Koi's preemptive move caught the third Hokage off guard, as the route operator was a highly skilled officer with a propensity for foreseeing and executing his superior's orders well in advance. I have faith that the command team will act appropriately as events unfold, but they'll require solid intelligence. What say you that we head to the front and make sure the staff gets it? Sarutobi asked, looking out the window toward the attack, just as a new cloud of dust and smoke burst from an explosion. A few seconds later, Koi and the third followed the rest of the squad through the window, and he muttered into his short-range radio as he gave the order for his team to move forward towards the assault. The arrival of Sarutobi and his guards at the battlefront was marked by a massive explosion about 2 blocks away. Using his keen eyes, the Sandame quickly assessed the situation and concluded that the defense was in a state of disarray. The enemy had moved too quickly, catching the garrison off guard, and the forces gathered against them and their giant crab summon were insufficient for the job. The retired Hokage observed that a significant area of destruction had already spread about 100 yards into the city, and the fact that the response had been haphazard and disorganized didn't help the cause of the defenders in any way. Condition. The first shinobi Sarutobi encountered had a big gash on his face that was leaking blood, and he appeared a little confused. "Sir, that damn thing attacked while I was on the wall. A man is riding on top of it. I might be the only survivor of my squad." "Have you had a clear view of the assailants?" The retired Hokage posed a firm question. "There's just the one on the crab, sir." That little factum did not make sense, and Sarutobi's eyebrows narrowed. Only a crazy maniac would attack a fortified position, much less the administrative and military command center of the province on its own. Unless. "Describe his person," he inquired. "He has multiple facial piercings and orange hair. Additionally, he had red clouds and a black cloak on." Whispered Akatsuki. Koi cursed. Sarutobi nodded. The attacker's description of his attire certainly fit the Akatsuki uniform, and it certainly fit the profile of someone who would have the audacity and daring to attack Chi's capital on his own, a member of an organization that counted a Sanin among its members. "Koi, have your people respond to the summons. Additionally, let the staff know to move quickly to bring in reinforcements and to be on the lookout for potential attacks on other axes." He had his own short-range radio, but he preferred not to use it unless absolutely necessary. He told the root officer, "I'll be along shortly to deal with the summoner." He told the wounded shinobi, "Retreat to the rear and get that wound treated." The third called for Enma, the Gorilla King, as the ninja nodded appreciatively and withdrew to the assigned medical stations in accordance with the emergency response plans. "Sarutobi, who are we fighting?" Enma asked, nosing around and taking in the scent of the air. "Akatsuki." "What number?" the gorilla questioned, clenching his knuckles at the prospect of a furious fight. "1, but he's attacking the capital alone. Even the Sanin would have been afraid to take on a walled city guarded by battle. Hardened shinobi. Must have a huge set of balls and no brains," Enma guffawed in response. Come to think of it, Kakashi's darlings were well on their way to becoming such powerhouses themselves. "Come, Enma, let's enjoy the battle and find out the truth for ourselves," Sarutobi shot back, his mind racing to other wars of the past when men and women of such power had walked the earth. Enma laughed at what his old friend had said, and he led the way, arriving in time to see the crab summon step near a building that Sarutobi's guard had set up for explosion. The root operatives set the house on fire as their mark went into the trap, and the blast tore into the crustacean even as the building itself was reduced to a smoldering, burning ruin. Sarutobi noticed that the person who had summoned the crab was not hurt in the explosion, and if the man was hindered by the death of his enormous pet, the professor could not see it in his eyes. The invader then summoned an even larger rhinoceros a short while later, demonstrating his power. The crab staggered out of the smoke and debris, with most of its shell on the left side of its body shattered, and vanished in a cloud of smoke. Seeing as how no one in recorded history had ever struck summoning contracts with two animal clans, and who knew what other abilities the wielder of such a skill had, Sarutobi, who'd expected another crab, upped the threat estimate and realized he was in for a hard-fought battle. The Sandame quietly filed away the observation that, like the crab before it, the rhino sported the same weird eyes as did the summoner. There was something strangely familiar about those eyes, and the retired Hokage could not shake the feeling he'd seen or read about them somewhere. Seeing Sarutobi, the rhinoceros lowered its head and charged the structure that the third was using as an observation post. Meanwhile, the root operatives on the third's flanks scattered to the flanks, all but Koi, who leapt to the ground to meet the charge headfirst and unleashed his seal of power, transforming into a hybrid of a human and a scorpion encounter. Charging the rhino, slamming the rhino's rough hide with a sting that tore its carotid artery, killing the two-horned beast mortally wounded and making sure Koi and Animal Pain landed safely on their feet. Root operators in the flanks threw ninjutsu attacks and various projectiles at Animal Pain, hoping to catch the Akatsuki leader off guard. In response, their quarry called forth two men who shared the same eyes as Animal Pain. And although it was impossible for anyone accidentally summoned into the middle of a hail of attacks to have complete situational awareness and react instantly, that is precisely what the new arrivals did. One of them somehow repelled the projectiles back to their owners with a wave of a hand, while the other absorbed and disappeared into thin air. Using his experienced eye to watch the action from the roof, Sarutobi saw that the newcomers had the distinctive orange hair and strange eyes, which he finally recognized from Jiraiya's letters and historical texts that most of the modern world had written off as myths and legends. "Rinnegan," he muttered, horrified by what he had discovered. The all-powerful eyes of the man who created the ninja world and performed such miraculous deeds as modern ninja could only dream of, the legendary eyes of Samsara, the dujutsu that had not been seen in the world of ninja since the time of the Sage of the Six Paths and was thought to have been lost to the sands of time, suddenly made Sarutobi doubt that the enemy was a reckless, overconfident fool who'd made a fatal mistake by attacking the city. Naturally, that line of reasoning led to another. When Kabuto switched sides, neither did Itachi know about the Rinnegan user in Akatsuki ranks. Or maybe the boy did know, but had chosen not to disclose the information due to the risks involved. Either way, the implication was that the knowledge was one of the errand organization's closest kept secrets, and yet, the organization had chosen to use such a key asset as a Rinnegan user, much less 3 such individuals, underscoring the importance they placed on the attack on the T capital. And there was only one important thing in T's capital to warrant anything remotely that powerful. Sarutobi smiled, knowing there was no counter and that the Akatsuki's main goal in this attack was already beyond their reach, and the third immediately invoked the signs to selectively wipe out all memory related to the One Tail using a forbidden technique and withdrew to the next building as the enemy's eyes turned on him. No good could come of any organization that had welcomed Orochimaru into their ranks gaining access to a tailed beast, and the information on Shukaku's whereabouts had to be protected at all costs, he knew. All shinobi of Chunin rank and below will assist and expedite the evacuation of non-combatants from the city, he growled into the short-range radio over the command channel as his subordinates engaged the enemy more closely. The 3 enemy ninja and their likely approaching reinforcements are the main target that the remaining ninja must eliminate or capture. Priorities are given to the main mission over collateral damage and casualties among civilians. Sarutobi was aware that by issuing those orders, he had effectively ridden off the city and condemned a great number of civilians to death. Although he would undoubtedly suffer many sleepless nights over the people he had sentenced to death today, Akatsuki could not allow the Rinnegan. In fact, he would not trust anyone but Konoha with the Rinnegan. In addition, even with all the forces under his command in T, the Sandaime did not relish confronting the wielders of the Samsara Eyes in broad daylight, so he had to use the city and damn the casualties. Sarutobi, are you certain about this? With the Enma pole arm clutched in his hand, Sarutobi inquired. The third gave a nod. It's just another thing to lose sleep over in a life full of decisions that kept one awake at night, Enma, he replied gravely. Then, with a grin on, better I should suffer for the rest of the days a witch fighting 3 Rinnegan users. I may not have all that many of than have the world suffer whatever lunacy the Akatsuki are cooking up. I find it hard to believe anyone can have the Rinnegan, much less 3 or more, the Gorilla King replied, if you say so. I fear they have been conducting experiments of their own, similar to Konoha, and have obtained access to Jiraiya's pupil, retorted Sarutobi, with great earnestness. Though my command be killed to the last man and this city be destroyed, Konoha needs this intel. Thus, swear to me that you will summon yourself if it appears that I am going to die. Enma gave a serious nod. I will, old friend. All right. Let's investigate whether the Rinnegan lives up to the hype. As the shinobi pulled away at the trough of a dive, a flying root operator in his hybrid crow human form prevented the beast from swallowing the shinobi whole. As the crow pulled up from its dive, it was hit on the wings by one of Asura Paine's missiles, which caused it to corkscrew into the ground and crash, though the kunoichi it had saved landed safely and rolled away. The Nagato saw through Diva Paine's eyes as the latter stared impassively at a charging Junin and repelled the woman towards one of Animal Paine's summons. Shortly after the beast's jaws snapped shut, an explosion neatly severed its head, and it vanished, sending up a cloud of dust. Taking advantage of the diminished vision, Human Pain attempted to engage 3 root operators from their flanks, but Sarutobi's polearms stretched and tripped the Rinnegan user's avatar. An astute root operator concealed among the wreckage of a building took advantage of Human Pain's fall and closing ranks with his target, spearing Human Pain through the heart, only to be crushed to a pulp by Animal Pain's new summon, which landed on him. A moment later, the beast's carapace was peppered with 12 powerful explosions that blew most of its legs to smithereens, sending the summon into a nearby building, collapsing the structure, and the beast vanished with a muted honk. As he watched the chaos of battle from a distance, Nagato felt both approval and disgust at the same time. The way the fire shinobi had attacked his avatars with little regard for property or the lives of onlookers was proof enough that he had seriously underestimated the retired third Hokage. The defense was so strong that even with 6 pairs of eyes and hands, 6 bodies, the Rinnegan and chakra levels that a tailed beast would have been jealous of, it was all he could do not to be overrun by the constant barrage of attacks launched from every direction at once. Worse than that, Nagato knew he'd lost the initiative, which was, in some ways, the worst news of all. While Sarutobi was taking a break, Koi finally attracted his attention and motioned for him to move to the side. It was now nearly 20 minutes into the battle and one sector of the city was completely ruined with who knew how many thousands of civilian casualties, but the Konoha shinobi had completely put the enemy on the back foot and the Sandaime was even starting to entertain the notion that he and a majority of his command would survive the battle and defeat the enemy, whereas earlier he'd mostly been hoping they'd achieve the latter. "Tell me, Koi," the venerable oldster asked the rude officer as they crouched behind a pile of rubble just beyond the immediate battlefield. "We've engaged 6 of the enemy so far, Sarutobi Sama," replied Koi. "Capabilities. Except for the Dujutsu, none of them employ any similar techniques. The first one calls forth, the second deflects ninjutsu strikes, the third can push objects away or draw them toward him, the fourth seems to be a changed puppet, the fifth is an expert in taijutsu, and the sixth appears to be able to revive the others and kill with a single blow. Resurrection? The third had believed them exaggerations himself and was not happy to be proved wrong. If such an ultra copyright ability as resurrection was truth, then what else could the Rinnegan do that wasn't written down or had been lost to time?" Sarutobi asked, not quite believing the words. It was said in the historical texts that the Rinnegan had the power over life, death, and creation, but even those few who knew the Sage of the Six Paths as fact and not fiction, considered the tale mere fable. Koi gave a nod. "Earlier, we eliminated both the summoner and the puppeteer. The person I mentioned used a strange demon to resurrect them, swallowing their shattered bodies whole and spitting them out alive and with life." The Hokage gave a nod. "Our situation? There have been casualties, and the evacuation is roughly halfway complete. Don't currently have a precise count of the deceased and injured." Sarutobi said, "Fair enough," returning his focus to the way the battle was being fought. "It seems obvious to me that we have to eliminate the one that brings the others back to life. Show me where he is, and I'll take care of him." With a predatory smile, Koi led the third back to the battle, knowing that if the enemy could not raise themselves, the battle was almost certainly won because there was just too much cover in a city and too many barriers preventing heavy hitters like the Rinnegan user from being effective. In situations like these, sheer force of will and sheer guts would prevail, and there was no shinobi in the world with more guts than Konoha's finest. He pointed out Naraka Pain, who had finally reached human pain and was in the process of resurrecting him. Outer Path Pain wasn't done with resurrecting human pain yet, so Diva and Animal Pain moved to defend Naraka Pain from the attack when they saw the withered form of the old Hokage leap out of a pile of debris and charge Naraka Pain from the rear. While Diva Pain moved to levitate nails and various metal fragments from the battlefield and send them shooting at supersonic speeds towards the oldster, Animal Pain moved to provide close support to Sarutobi's target. The shrapnel ripped into the Sandaime, producing an effect similar to a cannon firing grapeshot at light infantry. The third was literally torn from limb to limb, his head exploding like a melon, and his beaten corpse fell to the ground and turned into a neatly cut wooden log that had been switched with the old Hokage. Diva Pain realized he'd been tricked and closed ranks with Naraka Pain, while Animal Pain summoned a truly monstrous scorpion. Asura and Preta Pain formed an outer, defensive barrier against other would.be attackers. The scorpion saw the real Sarutobi and attempted to grab him with its claws, but the third used another Kawarimi to change his position, not abandoning his charge. The log the scorpion then snagged was rigged with explosive tags, which detonated with a muffled crack that blew the critter's appendage into numerous pieces. While the scorpion chittered in pain, the Sandaime unleashed a powerful stream of fire that tore through 2 legs on its right and sent it crashing down. A Jinchuriki was destroyed by an air fuel explosion in the Chunin Finals arena 3 years prior, so the resurrected Human Pain charged in from the flanks and kicked Sarutobi aside, giving Animal Pain time to summon something else. Meanwhile, several dozen propane tanks were launched into the clearing by route operators, who had been preparing it as a special surprise in the background. At a height of a dozen meters, just as Diva Pain was reacting to their launch by readying to repel them, the cylinders shattered in rapid succession. He pushed the cylinders away, which spread the fuel.air mixture further and brought it into contact with sparklers a fraction of a second earlier than it would have otherwise. Diva's shield protected him, as did Preta and Asura avatars, but Animal, Naraka, Outer Path, and Human were caught in the blast's fury and smashed into broken ruin. 1,000 pounds of propane mixed with air detonated in 4 separate explosions, one with varying yields. 2 partially ruined buildings close to the blast exploded, and 3 route operators caught in the fringes had their lungs scorched, exploded, and then ripped out of them even as their eyes imploded on them. The counterattack for the catastrophic blow was imminent, though, and even as the rain of various debris lessened in intensity, Diva Pain used his powers of repulsion to blow away everything within 100 yards. The strike claimed the lives of over 40% of the Konoha shinobi within the affected zone, and only a few strong ninja managed to stay upright while the tidal wave of destruction crushed buildings to dust and dug a massive crater around them. Does anyone have an extra propane tank? They would be very helpful to us. A stockpile caught in the fringes of Pain's attack exploded, sending a searing ball of fire, body parts, dirt, and rubble into the air, in response to some anonymous Konohajunin wheezing over the radio. All remaining units near the intruders, keep up the close combat with the enemy. Entice the adversary into the buildings and away from the cleared area. We need medevac for casualties as well as at least 2 companies of reinforcements, Sarutobi said to his command staff over the general frequency. Stay away from the central reserve. For this purpose, use the ones on the evacuation detail. From this point on, until we neutralize the enemy, the civilians are on their own, out of here and away. After communicating his orders, Sarutobi turned to face the charging Asura Pain. He stabbed his pole arm into the ground and used it as a pivot to lash out a powerful kick into the face of his attacker. Asura Pain fired one of his mechanical arms at the pole and deflected the blow with the other. Enma was stronger than the mechanical device, but the blow had enough force to lift him off the ground. The third Hokage stumbled and dropped the Gorilla King, so Asura Pain threw him towards Preta Pain, who took hold of the third Hokage and began to rip his victim's chakra. 6 root operators, working in pairs, saw the plight of the Hokage and launched 3 axes of attack. Diva Pain blocked 2 of them, Asura Pain stopped 2 more, but the final 2 managed to get through. One of those 2 used his ninjutsu to stab Preta Pain in the base of his neck, and the other severed his victim's legs at the knees. Needless to say, Preta Pain released his hold on Sarutobi, and the Sandame's rescuers darted out of the way before Diva Pain could launch another attack. Sarutobi. Sama, are you okay? Asked one of the 2. Sarutobi nodded, his face pale from the loss of chakra. A few more seconds and Preta Pain would have gone into a coma. Indeed. Give the men instructions to focus on the other and separate the mechanical one. The third answered, swallowing a few chakra pills. I'll rejoin the defense in a few seconds once I've caught my breath. At his age, he'd pay a heavy price for their use later, but that was the price of doing business. He radioed his orders to his command staff, and get someone to secure the bodies of the ones we'd killed so far and dispatch them to Konoha now. As soon as possible, we must begin our own Rinnegan research. The mission, which had started swimmingly, had faltered and there was now a real possibility of defeat. The primary goal of the assault on the T capital was to capture the third with a secondary goal of causing massive damage to the city infrastructure. The idea was to gain intelligence on the whereabouts of the One Tail and in the process deal a heavy blow to Fire Country's morale and war effort. The Nagato choked a curse at being frustrated once again. He'd been concentrating on capturing the Sandame Hokage, but it was obvious now that the approach was flawed. Destroy the city and then capture Sarutobi was the right course of action. The issues facing his avatars were the crowded nature of the construction in the city, which restricted their line of sight as well as effective range of their attacks, and the vast numerical superiority of the enemy shinobi whose leaders were just as ruthless as him. Perhaps that lay the key. The Junin who had been fighting Asura Pain exclaimed, "What the hell?" as his opponent abruptly lost consciousness and collapsed. After burying his previous opponent deep under the ground with an earth technique, he switched to the other fight, where his allies were using ranged attacks to take out the maniac. A massive fire dragon shot into the air toward a far off and despite being 200 yards away, he could feel the heat of the flames. A whole city block collapsed within a circle spanning 150 yards, taking the Junin by surprise and crushing him along with several shinobi. Alongside the ninja were a few dozen of the oldest, frailest, and/or sickest civilians who had either stayed or been abandoned. In order to avoid the dragon for the moment, Diva Pain flew sideways and focused on an area of the city that he could see was teeming with fugitives. With the force of his blow, flesh, earth, metal, and wood broke apart, and thousands of souls vanished from existence. He willed a water dragon into existence and sent it crashing into the flame dragon of the third, paying no attention to his victims. The 2 structures collided and burst into a gigantic steam bomb, but Diva Pain had already flown past the boiling apocalypse that covered their devastation. His abilities to repel and attract were then fully functional. So he walked casually to another part of the city and put several thousand more people to death. Sarutobi glared up at the sky from the top of the tallest standing building within a half-mile. Even his strongest blows were rendered useless at such long ranges. Thus, he watched helplessly as the Rinnegan user killed his people and destroyed his city, block by block. But there was that one method. Seeing the expression on the third's face, one of the surrounding shinobi proposed, "We'll rig the messenger birds with explosive tags and guide them to the enemy, Sarutobi, Sama." With composure, the Sandaime answered, "No, it'll be too late." There was nothing to gain by permitting the city to be destroyed because the enemy had altered the rules of the game and made the goal of his tactics unachievable. Invoking the death god with hand gestures, he proceeded over the radio in the same tone, saying, "The Rinnegan users' bodies must be sent to Konoha at all costs. Command devolves to whoever's the surviving senior-most officer of the ninja garrison. Save as many of my people as possible. Over and out." The ghostly form of the death god tore through the third's chest and the Nagato initially sensed the Kami's touch on his avatar before realizing it was on him. He felt Sarutobi's mind for a split second and knew that the other person had finally realized the truth. He easily and scornfully repelled the death god's attempt to take his own soul, but he was aware that the apparition would remain uncondemned as long as Sarutobi was alive. Considering that the truth about the 6 paths of pain needed to be kept hidden at all costs until it could no longer be relevant in the world they were creating, it wasn't as though the third had to be alive in order to read his thoughts. Sarutobi yelled, "Enma, tell them we got everything wrong." He knew the true nature of his enemy and what was going to happen to him in the brief moment when Nagato's and his minds met, either as a result of some unrecorded side effect of the forbidden technique he was using or as a result of a complication brought on by Nagato's unusual use of reanimated human puppets. None of them are real Anna. The third's head pinwheeled through the air as a ceramic plate sliced through his neck like butter, but instead of crashing to the ground, it shot high into the air. The death god disappeared after his principle was destroyed, and about 5 seconds later, the spot where Sarutobi had been standing was the focal point of another of Pain's attacks. A smoking ruin, the western watchtower was. The last dying cries of a poor soul caught in the blaze faded away, and the crackling flames of the wooden support beams reached for the sky. The main gate of the city walls was in ruins, just like the tower. The wall surrounding the gates was blown inward, leaving bits of dead and dying men, camels, and donkeys scattered in the wreckage. This man had a fist-sized hole where a rock from the explosion had crushed his face. A woman could be heard wailing miserably as she made a fruitless attempt to remove the fragment of wheel holding her to the ground. And there was a donkey, breathing its last from a collapsed ribcage, and it was exhaling bright red foam in great gasps. Sasuke and Sakura were on either side of Uzumaki Naruto, who was standing 100 yards away from the bloodshed. Each of the three had bloodstains on their clothes from their opponents, leaving them filthy and grimy. The rapidly cooling corpses of a battalion of wind samurai, bolstered by a few sand shinobi who dared challenge their approach to the city, were situated approximately 300 yards away from their position. "Hear me, Uzumaki, I fucked your mom and diddled you wife and sister, Naruto, Chunin of Konohagakure in the glorious land of fire. I would like nothing better than to emasculate your men, sell your women into abject slavery and take your children to Hai no Kuni to be raised as one of ours because your treacherous daimyo has betrayed my people by allying himself with those mangy dogs from lightning." Naruto addressed the city, projecting his voice through chakra to be heard by everyone inside the walls. "Luckily for you, my kind liege, the daimyo of Hai no Kuni has determined that I should spare your priceless hides and only indulge my baser cravings in the event that all other options are exhausted. So that there may be harmony among our people, I therefore demand that your daimyo walk his hairy, stinking behind out of your city and meet my colleagues and me where we stand outside the city. The remainder of you will surrender your daimyo's family, from whom we will choose 3 hostages to serve as a guarantee against additional betrayal. We anticipate that all prominent noble houses will also send hostages to the latter. You have 30 minutes to take action. You really don't want me to enter these walls because, I swear to God, I will burn down this disgusting site and salt the ground, so make wise choices." The daimyo of Wind was sitting glumly at the table with Sakura reading him the riot act, surrounded by 2 advisors but without any guards. This is the second time that Wind Country has attacked Hai no Kuni without a formal declaration of war. Do you recall the last invasion 3 years ago, when you claimed that the late Kazekage was to blame and denounced his actions as seditious? Fire Country was ready to believe that narrative at the time because we wanted peace and we treasured our friendship with Kase no Kuni, but it is well known that Suna supported Orochimaru's plans because you crippled their economy for your own small-minded motives. The noble daimyo of Hai no Kuni disregarded that important detail because of the long-standing ties between our 2 countries. But our decision-makers have been persuaded otherwise by the events of the last few months and your cooperation with foreign powers to undermine my nation. The need to review Hai no Kuni's policies regarding Kase no Kuni is undeniable in the halls of power. To establish the parameters of our new partnership, we are having this meeting today, Sakura stated calmly. The capital of their domain lay defenseless, and the 3 companions of the girl appeared ready to kill, but the daimyo and his advisors said nothing. they could dispute the Leaf Chunan's opening statement. The official surrender of Kei's no Kuni to Fire Country and the disbandment of your forces is our first priority. Naturally, the surrender will be complete. Absurd. Shogun Hosokawa Yoriyuki, the confidant and advisor to the daimyo, said in a tone that suggested offense, by what right do you call upon the surrender of our nation to you and your companions? With an indifferent reply, Naruto said, by right of having the power to reduce your stinking capital to dust and grime. She wanted Naruto by her side to cow the opposition, but she did not want him opening his mouth. Please, Danshaku Yoriyuki, Sakura drawled, addressing the daimyo's friend, but holding up a finger to silence the blonde. Let us not harbor delusions at this table, she continued, addressing the daimyo. You and your people are helpless, and the gates of your city are shattered. This is the natural law of wars, sufficient justification for surrender. We can burn down your capital and call another meeting if you refuse to accept historical precedents and argue the point. To my team and me, it really doesn't make a difference. Naturally, this won't apply to you either. As a condition for Kei's no Kuni's surrender, we'll demand that every member of your extended clan still alive within the walls be stoned to death. With a gesture, the daimyo stopped Yoriyuki from exchanging words as he glared daggers at the pink-haired Chunin. What are you in need of? He inquired. As I had mentioned, Kei's no Kuni, daimyo, surrendered. You will also cede your kingdom. But you don't have to be concerned about your family's safety and security. Your clan will relocate to Hai no Kuni, where you will have abundant defense against outside threats. It is in the best interests of Fire Country that wiser heads among the nobles be elevated to your throne in order to maintain Wind Country's stability. In essence, you plan to replace me with a puppet. Let's take a closer look at the details if you're inclined toward being blunt. Lord Daimyo, you started this unjust war. Furthermore, in the eyes of my superiors, you were the one who started the previous altercation apart from Orochimaru. It is obvious that Hai no Kuni thinks it is foolish for you to stay in power. I have no doubt that you will persist in your deceitful actions in the future. So, sure, we would like to have someone else take your place. We desire harmony along our borders. And we'll keep looking until we're certain the new guy isn't as foolish as his predecessor was. Sakura's statement made Naruto laugh hard, but the Wind Party goggled. This wasn't the way to negotiate, at least not if you wanted to come to a compromise. And that was the problema. Konoha's killers weren't looking for a compromise. Iya, my lord, tut tut. You did not say a single thing to refute our main demand. We're not going anywhere on this one. For there to be peace today, your removal is a requirement. We'll prove our intransigence on the matter by mounting your head on a pike. If that makes you doubtful, do you give in now? We will need some time to evaluate your suggestion, the daimyo respectfully retorted. Sakura appeared prepared to argue, but Sasuke gently touched her shoulder, causing her to pause before nodding. You have 30 minutes. When the daimyo and his cronies were no longer within earshot, Sakura turned her focus to Sasuke and they left the table for the capital's walls, which were a half-mile away. You did that, but why? You realize those bastards are just biding their time until the reinforcements they requested show up. Sasuke gestured to Naruto, who was holding a message scroll that one of his toad friends had given him. The blonde's face paled as he read the missive. 4x Due to the demands of the war, Kakashi had to work at his desk until the early hours of the morning. After making all the necessary decisions, he turned in for some well-earned rest at the break of dawn. However, an hour into his sleep, his assistant woke him up. The news he received was terrible. The capital of T was destroyed. Thousands of civilians were slaughtered without mercy. Hundreds of valuable samurai and shinobi were killed. The renegade Akatsuki was working with Hai no Kuni's enemies. They had the eyes of Samsara. Thousands of civilians were massacred. The daimyo was missing in action, most likely killed along with the rest of the capital's population. The implications were even more dire. T no longer had enough forces to fight the resistance. T would have to spend a great deal of money to care for the refugees and rebuild the economy. And far from becoming a net supply of men for Hai no Kuni's armed forces, precious trained units would have to be sent there to control the situation. But those very same units were needed on the wind border, the grass border, the rice border, and of course, the high seas to ensure water did not take advantage of the opportunity. From a strategic perspective, the war that Fire had spent so many years preparing for had arrived and was almost certain to overwhelm his country. Besides, if the daimyo were dead, there was the matter of succession. The man had no known problems from his loins, and through the line of succession there were three claimants who had the authority, the stature, and the support to stake a claim on the throne. The civil war that followed would leave Hai no Kuni open to all and determine the fate of his country. There had never been a more dire outlook for Fire Country. On a personal note, Kakashi's 3 children would almost certainly be interred in an unmarked grave somewhere due to the Sandame's demise and the destruction of the forces under his command. 4x. Naruto, what's wrong? Sakura inquired. With a gesture towards Sasuke, the blonde gave the scroll to his teammate and they headed towards the Wind Continent. What's happening? Sasuke asked in a low voice, walking step by step with his friend. Naruto choked back. They killed the Sandame and nuked the tea capital, Sasuke. Who carried out? Sensei, says Akatsuki. Sakura inhaled deeply. Before reaching Sarutobi, Akatsuki would have needed to go through the whole tea contingent. Deadly. I want estimates on how the losses in tea would affect the war, she asked, deciding to mourn the good-natured old man later. Huge. If I were to read between the lines, I would estimate that we had lost at least 30% of the forces in the capital. The city has been reduced to a collection of craters, and the daimyo is also missing, most likely killed. Akatsuki intended the greatest number of civilian casualties with whoever he sent after the city. Has Kakashi Sensei left any messages for the 3 of us? Sasuke said, never mind, I'll find out myself, unfolding the scroll. Danzo. Sama's to retreat to Hai no Kuni's borders and fend off Kei's no Kuni's forces with the forces at hand. There won't be any more help. For the duration of this crisis, we are under Danzo Sama's command. Which is why we have to end this siege now, Naruto replied to the other characters. If we can have peace on this border, we can shift the forces deployed on this front to the others. Provided we can be sure Kei's no Kuni won't backstab us at the earliest opportunity, Sakura added. Yes, that is true, Naruto answered. But we already know how to solve that issue, don't we? Sasuke gave a snort. Yes, we do. What does this signify? Yoriyuki asked, his sword raised in front of the charging leaf nin. The situation has changed, Sakura said. We come to apprise you of it and to issue new terms. How has the circumstances evolved? The daimyo inquired. Sakura waved him off, saying, that is not important. What matters is that you stay in power and that you give up Kei's no Kuni. We want 5 hostages from each of the immediate families of all nobles and prominent merchant houses in your capital within the next 30 minutes. The terms of the surrender will be negotiated at a later time. And what do we get in return? An instantaneous declaration of truce. You will write messages to the commanders of your units, and we will forward them to them. How is Danzo doing? We'll send messages to Danzo Sama regarding your surrender. That's not enough. Is enough of your capital burned to ashes? Sakura politely inquired. It makes no difference how many hostages you take if Danzo stays. Not every one of my nobles, not even most of them, is in my capital at the moment, and I anticipate that many of them will fight as long as that man is on Kei's no Kuni territory. You want me to give up and rule, and I will, but I need that man to be gone in order for me to rule. Even if we destroy your money? The daimyo gave a nod. Sakura stared thoughtfully for a minute. The daimyo's words were only partially true, of course. While Danzo's supporters undoubtedly wanted him dead, there was also a great deal of anger directed towards Kei's no Kuni's ruler. It took a lot of work to destabilize a country as much as Wind had, and most people would blame their daimyo for it. Excellent. It is not for me to negotiate troop deployment on that scale. I'll forward your arguments to the Hokage, but ultimately it's up to him, the daimyo, or their appointive agent to decide. But now we'll have the hostages. They ought to inspire you to persuade your nobles to maintain the status quo until matters are resolved. And in the event that neither your Hokage nor the daimyo, or their proxy, concur that Danzo ought to be removed from Kei's no Kuni. When we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. The captives. The daimyo insisted, we need some show of goodwill on your part. There you have it. You fail to notice that my colleagues are destroying your city. 4x half an hour later. We're running late, Sakura informed her friends. Naruto spat on the ground and hawked. Yes, we are. We're powerless to change it. The hostages are at least now gathered. We're safe because the Suna reinforcements won't return in full until dusk. I guess. What do you suppose will happen when the Wind Daimyo finds out that he was duped by us? Hopefully, he won't suffer a cardiac arrest. Sasuke whispered, until things calm down on the other fronts, we need the bastard in power. Is there anything we can do? Danzo Sama received a letter. He'll withdraw most of his forces to fire through different routes of extraction, leaving some with his allies in the wind to protect them from any reprisals from the daimyo. Additionally, Kakashi Sensei has been informed of the Kei's no Kuni situation and will shortly be receiving the hostages. How about us? Should we allow the toads to deliver the hostages or do we personally deliver them? Naruto inquired. Disregarding the old man's lapdog interest in the conversation, Sasuke said absent-mindedly, "Our orders are to attach ourselves to Danzo. Sama's command, but there's nothing that says we can't deliver the hostages ourselves via Toad Express and report to our commander later." Sakura gave a nod. "Works for me. And what about that asshole who rules K's no Kuni, our dear, beloved daimyo?" questioned Sasuke. Sakura guffawed, and Naruto snorted. "Is it not apparent? We'll be debriefing in Konohagakure with our hostages secure, while Camel Sodomizer has wet dreams about how he'd have his troops intercept us before we ever cross the border." The blonde remarked. "Imagine the look on his face when the great plotter finds out he's been outwitted by teenagers." "That makes me feel good," Sakura remarked with a maniacal smile. "I think it does," Naruto answered, turning to face the assembled noble figures and saying, "Now, everyone, form a semicircle." The captives moved into a smaller group. "All right. You are all hostages in Konohagakure, I suppose. Now, I realize that a lot of you are afraid of this, but most of the people living in Hidden Leaf are just regular people like you. You'll receive excellent care, and no one will mistreat you if that would be detrimental to Hai no Kuni and could jeopardize the precarious peace between our countries. So, be happy. We'll return you to Wind as soon as things get better," Sasuke told the assembly. 4x When the young man with dark hair finished speaking, Naruto called forth a group of toads and explained the plan to them. He had to assure them of large bribes that Kakashi Sensei would pay because, just as humans disliked being inside a toad's stomach, toads did not like swallowing a man only to eject him alive later. Eventually, after hesitating for a short while, his allies agreed. Gamma Ryu, the oldest brother among the summoned, remarked, "We don't like being used like this, big brother Naruto. First, old man Jiraiya wanted us to transport a shitload of strangers and now you do." "I'm sorry, little brother," said Naruto, "I wouldn't do this unless the circumstances were unavoidable. You asked, so my brothers and I will do it once, but I'm going to bring this up with boss. We are not creatures of labor. We toads shouldn't have to put up with such abhorrent treatment. You must pay the fees up front if you and old man Jiraiya wish to repeat this in the future." "I recognize. To discuss the terms, Jiraiya Sensei and I meet with the boss as soon as possible." "Good. I'm going to divide the group into 30-person teams now, and I'll ask one team to climb into a brother's mouth. They will undoubtedly refuse. As soon as they do, seize them and consume them. After that, we'll head out." "Yes, big brother." With an expectant smile on his face, Naruto nodded and turned to face the gathering, anticipating the daimyo's reaction as his family and relatives were sucked whole. 4x For the first time in history, a team of 3 had forced the surrender of one of the 5 elemental nations, and Kakashi smiled benignly at the irate complaints of the wind guests. He had never been more proud of his students than he was then. With the surrender of Wind, the future that had seemed so dire in the morning was less horrific. The Hokage even thought he could see the hint of daybreak on the distant horizon. He would see to it that a peaceful succession to the throne was guaranteed, and then deal with the other threats. The idea of an operation to deal with grass was already germinating in his mind. The Hokage laughed and shifted slightly to avoid the stench as the stink of a couple of dozen nobles puking up wind. "The will of fire will not be stifled as long as there are leaves to feed the flames, so we will win this war yet." It was a day of vengeance and decision, a day of death and destruction, a day when a small group of people demolished the rogue Akatsuki's horrific plans and turned the world upside down. On that day, on the southern front of fire, in the land of tea, barely 2 days had passed since the brutal attack of Akatsuki had reduced the densely populated capital to a nightmare of craters. On the eastern front, the shadow war in Rice between Kumo and Konoha over control of the vast rice paddies of Rice had escalated to a conflict of moderate intensity, with both sides increasing their commitment. On the north eastern front, Grass and Rock were marching their units as quickly as possible into fire. On the northern front, the corridors of power and wind were a tumultuous momentous occasioned by news of the tea disaster. That day, in Pain's lair, Uchiha Madara and Uzumaki Nagato were dismayed to learn that Hiruzen Sarutobi had taken the Shukaku secret with him to his grave. Neither man enjoyed being outwitted, and they both detested the idea that their plans had come to naught. Madara was especially displeased with the information about K's no Kuni's surrender to Hai no Kuni. At that moment, in Konohagakure, Kakashi said to his assembled lieutenants, which included department heads, council members, and selected journalists, "We will start with a briefing on the attack on tea and the situation in other theaters of the war before moving on to discuss the situation at Succession Crisis at home and our response to the destruction of the tea capital." You've read the reports my people prepared on the attack on the tea capital, Inoichi said, getting to his feet. Though reports are still coming in, the state of affairs is dire. In fact, there were too many dead, too many injured, too many businesses that disappeared without a way for their creditors to recover their losses, too much of everything. However, the misfortune has a bright side. The people of Tea are furious with our enemies for the damage they have caused, and the tale of the Sandame's valiant death protecting the city has led to a record level of support for Hai no Kuni. Never has Tea been a more ardent supporter of Hai no Kuni. That's a very good thing, Tsunade remarked, because it means we can use those troops to reinforce the front and reduce the number of forces in Tea. It's even better in light of the fact that prior to this meeting, we were concerned about locating reinforcements to quell the insurgency in Tea. Inoichi gave a nod. Yes, we can reduce the force to a certain point. There will be some banditry among rebels who have turned to criminality, but not a lot. At this stage, the majority of rebels are undoubtedly bandits in all but name. The problem can be handled by the militia who have been reinforced with small shinobi packets. How many units, then, can we move to the fronts? Shikaku inquired. Now, a maximum of 2 battalions. Of course, that's just the shinobi. For the next few months, the samurai regulars will be crucial to keeping the law and order situation intact. And 4 regiments in 4 to 6 months, I believe. That's 2 battalions I didn't have when I walked into this meeting, Shikaku said. Fair enough. Kumo is now strengthening their troop numbers in Rice. According to our intelligence, they are sending a regiment of shinobi and a reinforced division to the front. We will be unable to counter their move for at least 3 weeks because our troops are dispersed to the depths of hell and beyond. To be honest, Rice isn't exactly high on our list of priorities right now. On that front, our strategic stance is one of defense. The Iwa Kusa penetration towards our capital takes highest priority, and we'll be sending the units from T to shore up the defenses. The situation there is very fluid. Jiraiya Sama's unit has really been the only thing keeping the enemy from capitalizing on their initial gains, but he and his men have got to be running ragged by now, what with having to contend with a numerically vastly superior enemy, 2 Jinchuriki and Iwa's strongest operators by themselves. It'd be a complete disaster if they're overwhelmed. Kakashi questioned, you think the 2 battalions from T won't be enough? Inoichi looked over at Shikaku. Go dem. Sama, it's not even close, replied the strategist. We estimate manpower requirements as 3 divisions of samurai and 2 regiments of shinobi. And we need those on the front today. We don't have them. Kakashi looked around the table and said, what do we have and what are our options? I'm not in favor of such in-your-face, come and get it, battles those numbers imply. And all this is assuming that Akatsuki won't do a repeat of Tea capital on our lines on the Iwa front or on our cities. That's right, Inoichi agreed, nodding. Hai no Kuni had to act before the enemy's capacity to completely destroy cities across the globe destroyed the armies and the country's morale. That something needed to be just as spectacular and ideally involved taking out a stronghold. Additionally, the penalty needs to be as severe as the Tea capital. But how to deal with an enemy that operated with roving, clandestine cells of 2 or fewer and did not claim territory? Kakashi questioned once more, so, what do we do? We've given the subject some thought and we believe what your students accomplished in Wind will go a long way towards troop morale, but that leaves the problem of Akatsuki doing an encore elsewhere. And frankly, we don't know what to do about that because we don't have a similar capability. Thoughtful lips pursed Kakashi's. Even the advisors of the Hokage were ignorant of some things. Was it time to slide that compartment open? His children would be in danger if he did this. However, failing to do so would put the country in danger. He whispered, assume we do for the sake of this discussion. The idea caused heads to raise. If we assume that, then the question then becomes where and when to use the weapon. The second half of the question is very easy to answer. Damn soon. As to the first part, the ideal target would be Akatsuki HQ, but so far as we're aware, the organization is small, highly dispersed and we have 0 penetration into their ranks, replied the head of intelligence, skillfully deceiving the final detail. Though only 3 people were aware of the spy's existence now that Sarutobi was dead, Konoha had a mole inside Akatsuki. In actuality, the sleeper agent wasn't very helpful and hadn't been used for 2 reasons aside from the advantage over the other villages. The first was that there was no way for timely information to be passed from the spy to Akatsuki's leaders. Second, any action taken based on actionable intelligence provided by the asset would jeopardize the source's identity, and that would be the only thing the spy wrote. Tsunade inquired, so what do we do? We can't influence Akatsuki directly, Inoichi replied to Shikaku, but assuming we have such a capability as demonstrated in T, we can force Akatsuki's controllers to restrain the rogue organization. The medic.nin said, "You kill our cities, we kill yours." Precisely. Tsunade went straight to Kakashi and asked, "Can we do this?" That assumption is the basis of this discussion. "No, Kakashi, you know what I mean. Do we have this capability?" Thoughtful lips pursed Kakashi's. What other option did he have, though? "Yes, we do." Shikaku inquired, "How soon can we deploy the acid?" Figuring out Kakashi's secret weapon didn't require a genius. "If the decision is made, we can strike within the next couple of days, I shouldn't wonder. And we've already seen plenty of proof that reach is not an issue," Shikaku continued, directly addressing Kakashi's stare. There could be no doubts now, if he had any. Naruto Uzumaki. Kakashi gave a nod. "Yes. So, who do we hit and how hard do we hurt them?" "As for me, I prefer Iwa," Tsunade declared. Her disdain for rock was widely recognized. Her brother and fiancé copyrighty had been killed by Iwa, and they deserved to die horribly. "With I think not," Shikaku responded. "Who'd restrain Akatsuki if we take out the Iwa command structure? Certainly not Kusa's leaders." "Kusa then?" inquired Inoichi. Shikaku gave a nod. "Yep. It'd punish Kusa, warn Iwa to back off, destabilize the invasion's supply and the Iwa Kusa border, and force Iwa to restrain Akatsuki." Kakashi grinned. "I like it. Who knows, if we do it right, we might even trigger a civil war within their ranks." Inoichi said, "We have to leave a calling card. Yeah, we want the world to know we did it, and since we're going to be inserting a small team, it's possible their origins would be overlooked in the chaos following our strike." Kakashi smiled menacingly. "I'm sure we can do that." Moving on, Inoichi continued with his report. "It looks increasingly likely that the succession crisis for the daimyo throne isn't going to be settled peacefully. We have intercepts that have all 4 major contenders sending feelers out to sympathizers and acquaintances for support, and requests from 3 of the 4 their known loyalists for armed partisans. 2 of the 4 have also left the capital for their strongholds, and all 4 are gathering household troops for a showdown. All the good units, even the household troops, are on the fronts. The ones that are on the rear are garrison troopers, REMFs and pretenders," Tsunade said with a sigh. "What do they hope to accomplish with those jokers?" "I'd be laughing with you if we aren't seeing some disquiet among units of the household troops, actually," Inoichi responded. "How bad is the situation getting? We've had to execute 1 commandant and about a dozen samurai so far in 5 separate incidents after fighting broke out between members of different households. That is officially. And officially, we're hearing the NCOs have their hands full with fights and disturbances. We estimate better than 95% of the cases are being dealt with using non-judicial punishments." "That is a significant and alarming figure," Shikaku said. "Indeed. What can we do about this? We can't have units on the front at each other's throats in the middle of a war with Iwa and Kumo," Kakashi responded. Inoichi blandly replied, "Solve the succession crisis before things get worse." "By working with the samurai and choosing a successor ourselves, you mean?" "Preferably, yes. Do we have the time? Will the samurai lords cooperate?" "The samurai lords are uneasy about the current state of affairs. My office has had feelers from about a quarter of them on the subject." "That is good news, but the other problem is all 4 major contenders are scumbags and chiselers unfit to manage a pigsty, much less lead fire country. I think the samurai lords would agree with me on that." Inoichi grinned. In point of fact, a good third of the feelers suggested the same thing. "Problems of errant noblemen with delusions of grandeur can be dealt with easily and often has been in the past," Shikaku stated. "The cure is typically 100 grams of steel applied at the proper time and space." Tsunade shook her head at Shikaku, laughing. "For a lazy bum, you sure are a bloodthirsty sob," she replied. "Not that I disagree with your suggested cure, mind." Kakashi gently noted, "That does not solve the problem and may exacerbate it without an acceptable heir to the throne. And none of the lords will bear to see anyone else from their ranks elevated to the post of daimyo over themselves. Perhaps we should let the situation evolve a bit further then and see how things pan out," suggested Shikaku. Inoichi answered, "Why? I can only see it getting worse as time goes on. The waters are too muddy now. Perhaps a proper candidate will emerge, or the 4 will choke and die. Who knows, pigs may even learn to fly. But mostly, I want us to lay down the law after we burn grass to the ground. We'll have breathing room afterwards to do whatever needs to be done." Kakashi admitted, "The last part sounds reasonable. I think we have covered the issues to everyone's satisfaction for the day. Let's call in my students and apprise them of the situation, shall we?" In a clearing, Naruto lay on the grass and observed the clouds. Sakura and Sasuke flanked him. In 30 minutes, they were to report to the Hokage's office for orders, but for now, they were just here to unwind. You guys occupied my preferred location for viewing clouds, Shikamaru grumbled as she joined them. Genius. Man, I don't see your name written anywhere, Sakura muttered. As she spoke, her eyes were closed. Ha. Ha. Shuffle a little to the left, you three. I want to talk to you. Sakura's eyelids snapped open. About what? Shikamaru gave a shrug. Get you two to move, Sakura muttered. She said to the Nara, talk. First, I have to thank you three for saving Fire's collective butt in wind. We were doing our jobs. If you want to be properly grateful, I recommend a barrel of sake and an all-you-can-eat meal for the three of us, said Naruto. There are other ways to show your gratitude, but you aren't the proper sex for that. You've got it. The sake and the meal, I mean. You'll have to look elsewhere to have your ashes hauled. Stillness. I'm sorry about the Sandame. I know you three were very close to him. Naruto let the sentence hang, saying, don't be. He went out the way he wanted. But if we get our hands on the bastard who got him. Shikamaru had a robust enough imagination to fill in the details. He said, I don't doubt it. If Asuma were killed, he suspected he would feel the same way. Satuto huffed and sat up. He uttered loudly, see, Shika, this is what I don't understand. There was no call to nuke the city after they killed the third. And there was no reason for Akatsuki to go after him either. I don't understand those fuckers. Shikamaru was silent for more than a minute as he gathered his thoughts and wrote his response. While they waited, Sakura and Sasuke stood up and joined Naruto. Finally, he said, I wish I could tell you I understand them, Naruto. To tell the truth, I think they are murderous vermin in need of extermination, and I don't think that characterization is all that removed from reality. Sasuke gave a snort. But you see, I also think Akatsuki are a symptom of a far greater disease than the disease themselves. What do you mean? Inquired Uchiha. Consider the world we live in. Our governments are military dictatorship with power hoarded in the hands of a few. Everyone's looking out for themselves and their clan, and they place loyalty to the clan and to the close family over loyalty to the nation. That's the way things are, Shika. You are loyal to your blood because push comes to shove, they're the most likely to support you and guard your back, Sakura responded. The Nara gave a nod. Yes. But look at the corollary. When we trust our families and to a certain extent, our friends, we don't trust anyone else outside the two groups. As example, consider how techniques and such are hoarded by clans. So, Sasuke inquired. He saw the importance of being devoted to his teachers, teammates, and the Uchiha crest. In addition, even though he was devoted to Konoha, his allegiance to the village's ideal was based on the devotion of his instructors and fellow members. The idea is that, as long as the majority of people prioritize their family over their country, there is no reason to respect or trust the legal system unless the judge is a member of your family. This will ultimately lead to death because, in the end, your descendants will only prosper when the nation prospers. In addition, due to the properties of chakra, there is a fundamental inequality in our society because only a small percentage of people possess enough chakra to use as a weapon, giving them an unfair advantage over everyone else. Add in the different bloodlines, and you have even more social stratification. Now, add to this mixture the belief that allegiance to one's clan or family comes first, and you have a society in which those in positions of power take advantage of the system to the fullest and condemn those who are disadvantaged by birth. In actuality, the system is biased to support sons and daughters who possess chakra. Shikamaru turned to face his audience. Sasuke appeared thoughtful, Sakura was listening to him with rapt attention, and Naruto had a look of revelation on his face. Anyway, back to the point, Naruto. I believe that the Akatsuki is a necessary organization in our world. Why shouldn't there be outlaws who are envious of power and whose only allegiance is to it? Given that our cultural ethos extols the virtues of power struggles and the pillage of the defenseless and vulnerable, why shouldn't there exist individuals who take no pride in abusing their position to trample others? To put it simply, we chakra users are the good or bad guardians of the elemental nations. However, the issue with having a guardian in place without supervision is best described by the question, quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Thus, Naruto, both this war and Sandame's demise were unavoidable. Though not nearly sane enough, I occasionally wonder in the dead of night, when I'm depressed and thinking dark thoughts, if the Yondaime Mizukage was the sanest person in the world. You see, even though his short-term solution was murderous and monstrous in intent, it ignored the issue of his chakra wielders, who are also contributing to the problem. Not only the bloodline clans he attempted to eradicate. Sasuke gave a snort. Shika, you are an idiot, and suicidal, I believe. According to what you've said, mass suicide would be the greatest thing we could do for the world. Sasuke, I didn't say that. I have given this topic a great deal of consideration. For as long as men exist on this planet, the only way to create the conditions for enduring peace, in my opinion, is to either eliminate all individuals who possess chakras and any children who exhibit aptitude, or find a way to make the use of chakras unimportant in combat. Jiraiya would never stop talking about the cycle of hatred during their sessions, but after hearing Shikamaru speak, Naruto nodded. The blonde thought the Sannin had missed the forest for the trees, and he realized that the cycle of hatred was just another sign that the Akatsuki were suffering. I see. Regards, Shika. You've provided me with a lot to consider. We have a meeting with the Hokage right now, but we'll finish this conversation later. The Nara gave a nod. See you around. Yes. Unknown place. Staring at the unmarked grave, Uchiha Madara realized that even his closest associates in Akatsuki were not privy to certain things, and that was why he came here whenever he needed to vent his anger. He was running late for a meeting with Nagato and a few others in Akatsuki, but this was important. You are aware of how broken the world is. It is not going to alter, although you aren't. I wish you were here to save the world and put things right. I'm attempting to take on your load. However, it's challenging. As usual, the vermin are blocked by the Senju. I shouldn't hate them because I know they don't know any better, but they've done a great job of destroying both my and your life's work. Like I did with the Uchiha traitors, I wish I had killed the slippery swine. They hid the one tail and we don't know where it's hidden. And now, they have the two tail and there's always our personal nemesis, the Kyuubi and its Senju master. We need those two-tailed beasts to execute the plan successfully. Watch over me and bless our blessings so that I can bring our goals to fruition. I know we can still pull this off. We need just a bit of luck and everything will work out fine. Jiraiya inquired, how bad is it? The Kunoichi tiredly blinked her away. She appeared unclean and resembled a chew toy that had been misused and discarded, which, considering the struggle she had endured, wasn't too far from the reality. Bad enough. We lost 2 dead and 1 wounded. The Jinchuriki were waiting for us in ambush and we walked right into the trap. We were lucky to get out alive. You lost them, right? They did not bother with a chase. I suspect they wanted us to spread the word. They would. The news of their presence is enough to force me to make their raiding forces stronger, which reduces the number of units we can have on the field and weakens the overall effectiveness of our force. The pro tem assistant to Jiraiya questioned, what do we do? That was just a fancy way of saying walking wounded, given the circumstances. We try to draw them into a trap ourselves. It's going to take a couple of days to set up because we're going to need to concentrate our troops. Effective immediately, the raids on the supply trains cease until we've seen off the Jinchuriki. Yes, sir. The front? The front will have to hold without us for a little while. Because the way I see it, they can hold a little while as we handle the problem or they can hold forever while we push up daisies. The Godime's assistant led Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura into the Hokage's office. It wasn't just Kakashi. He was accompanied by Inoichi, Shikaku, and Tsunade. Godem. Sama, Haruno, Uzumaki, and Uchiha reporting as ordered, Sakura said with a crisp salute. Sasuke and Naruto also saluted, though their forms were uninspired. Kakashi gave a headshake. It was quite sad, he informed them. I apologize, Hokage. Sama, Naruto uttered gravely. No, you're not. Kakashi shot back angrily. He then spoke again, but in a hushed tone, saying, I have another mission for you 3. It's going to be hard and you're going to pay the price, but there's no other option. Naruto stood up straight. Godem. Sama? Please kill everyone in Kusa capital for me down to the cats and dogs. Please kill everyone in grass down to the cats and dogs. With expressionless expressions on their faces, Team 7 gazed. Sakura inquired, Sensei? Kakashi calmly explained, I want you 3 to go down to grass and reprise against their capital for what happened in T. That's tens of thousands of people, Sasuke muttered on. Looking around the room, he said, Sensei, we're your students. We've done everything you've ever asked us to do. But this destroying an entire city, this doesn't feel right. You're talking about primary targets being civilians and not soldiers or military infrastructure. And it won't even hurt Akatsuki as we've no proof that Kusa's been working with them. We'd be stooping to Akatsuki's level if we do that and we're better than that. Isn't there something else we can do? I wish there were, Sasuke. I wish I didn't have to ask this of Naruto, but we have no other choice other than surrender. I understand you're asking Naruto to do this because you think that we need to demonstrate deterrence to avoid a repeat of T-Capital, Sensei, Sakura said, as she argued with her superiors, but aren't you assuming that they can do an encore? We have no proof that assumption is right. We can't very well wait until they nuke another city for your proof, Sakura, replied Tsunade. Shikaku continued, we have to assume they have the capability. It is the only reasonable assumption. Else, why would they have wasted it on T-Capital? Sakura started to say, but stopped when Naruto raised his hand to silence her. Sakura and Sasuke looked at the blonde. He gave them a brief smile as he looked at them. Thanks for protecting me, guys, but I agree with Sensei. I know you do too. Sasuke gave a snort. He's asking you to become the greatest mass murderer in the history of the elemental nations, Naruto, he replied. Others had stamped documents and declared war on other countries, killing far more people, but no one could have killed as many people directly as Naruto would have if he fulfilled the Godaime's wish. T-Capital had some time to evacuate. Kusa won't. Kakashi. Sensei didn't order you, idiot. He can't order you to do something like this. Refuse. Sasuke is correct on that count, Naruto. I'm not going to order you to do something like this, Kakashi responded. Naruto said quietly, but if I don't, the war is going to be lost, isn't it? Most probably, yes. I think there's a remote possibility that we can get Iwa, Kumo and even Akatsuki to the negotiating table, but we'll have to surrender and they'll expect massive concessions from us. With conviction, Sasuke said, then surrender. It was one thing to threaten to burn down a city, but to really do it. Neither Sasuke nor his teammates were that kind of insane. No, Sasuke. Iwa has driven too deep into our territory and are looking at outright victory if we don't hold them for the next few months. There is no reason for them to come to the negotiation table at this juncture, Shikaku responded. Sasuke's shoulder was touched by Naruto's hand. With a sorrowful grin, Kakashi addressed the group of people seated behind the table, saying, Jinchuriki, the power of human sacrifice, Sensei. Always and forever. So, what's one more sacrifice when there have been so many others? Sasuke responded. You know they're right, Sasuke. Let it drop. With tears in his eyes, Kakashi said, I'm sorry, Naruto. Although the Godem knew the price his student would pay for his execution, he still signed the order. Although he would not have chosen to send his children to such a fate, he was forced to do so by circumstances. I know you are, Sensei, but needs must when the devil drives. A moment's silence. Can we win if I do this? I don't see the point of so much blood on my hand otherwise. Kakashi looked over at Tsunade. Her tone darkened. If we can hold for 4 months, we'll be in a position to win or negotiate a peace, she stated. Provided the other side doesn't burn out more of our cities, there are weapons we've developed that we can deploy on the Iwa front in 4 months. With these new weapons and the reinforcements from the K's no Kuni and T fronts, we should be able to push them back to the border and beyond. Kakashi gave the order. Tsunade and Kabuto will give the 3 of you a tour. Naruto can give us his decision once that is done. Before the other members of the Akatsuki group gathered, Deidara questioned Pain, can't we destroy Konoha like you did T? In order to finalize the plan to recruit 2 new members and discuss strategy, Pain convened an all-team meeting with the 4 remaining teams. Conversations about strategy had led to discussions about T's destruction and the ensuing fallout. The deranged lunatic Deidara was eager to join in the destruction of additional cities within the High no Kuni sphere of influence. Toby gave a little hop. Madara had just joined the group overtly, adopting the presumptive persona of a strong, mentally impaired idiot. Toba's a good boy, but Senpai likes to kill puppies and kittens. Bad Senpai. Deidara glared at the stupid orange, masked person, full of hate and disgust. Enough, Pain said. We destroyed T to weaken High no Kuni and to destroy any chance for a negotiated peace between fire, earth and lightning. Further weakening fire by destroying their infrastructure is against that purpose. Glancing around, Deidara questioned, so we do nothing? Yes. Soon enough, fire will be defeated. Earth and lightning will turn on each other over the spoils. We'll wait until the hiding places of the 1 and 2 tail become evident and capture them. Until then, we will improve our penetration of the villages and do nothing except making good the losses of Hidan and Kakuzu. Is that understood? Yes, leader. Naruto pointed to a metal device set atop a table in the middle of the lab and said, what is this? The machine was open, and the assistants to Tsunade and Kabuto were fiddling with it. Ever the showman, Kabuto waved and said, this is the future of war. Okaya. The medic. Nin said, you don't believe me? Sakura said, nodding, yep. Sasuke inquired, what does it do? It's a machine that mass produces seals. In other words, a printer. We've had that for a long time, you know, Sakura replied. And they definitely have not revolutionized warfare. What Sakura says? Printers are not a revolution. A shinobi is needed to expend the chakra to charge the printed seals, and that has always been the second bottleneck with the application of seals in war. Because no matter how fast you produce seals, they can't be used unless they're charged, and you need shinobi to charge them, Naruto was told. Quite. With normal printers, that's the case. But this is different, Kabuto countered. Sasuke's eyebrow shot up. How so? Do tell. This printer is mechanical engineering meets traditional fuinjutsu meets seals of power. Huh? This seals that are printed with this printer is different, you see. This printer has modified templates of the explosive seal, the genjutsu resistance seal and the chakra sensing seal. The modifications include a limited chakra storage mechanism that is rechargeable and a charging seal that draws ambient chakra to fill the chakra reservoir. Naruto, who was aware of the technological challenges the research team had surmounted, fixed his intense gaze on the printer. This was the holy grail of fuinjutsu, the means of surpassing the two conventional constraints on sealing: chakra charge and production rate. The speed at which seal masters could write seals and the bearer's chakra capacity to charge them would no longer be a bottleneck for seal use. Looking at you in shock, how did you get this done? He asked. Kabuto grinned and said, slowly, painfully, and with a lot of trial, explosions, error, and more explosions. Team 7 started giggling. I wish I had been there to see the research in process, said Naruto. As I understand it, you had more important things to do, like capturing Jinchuriki, toppling unfriendly regimes, fighting insurgents and the like. It's all nonsense, Naruto declared firmly. This is the stuff of history. Jiraiya Sensei is going to cream in his pants when he hears about this. I almost did. Sakura gave Naruto a back of the head slap. Cut the vulgarity, you idiot. Ah, Sakura-chan, you know I'm excited about seals, is all. She answered, I know. To Kabuto, I can see the printer's uses in war, but is it really a game changer? You know those anti-personnel fragmentation bombs that Yuanbu favor is forever constrained by the production rates of explosive seals. This machine overcomes that in one go, Kabuto said. Sakura said, I guess it would work if the charging rate is fast enough. Sasuke inquired, what's the charging rate, by the way? Kabuto was even kind enough to appear embarrassed. 7 weeks. And we don't ever see that coming down without increasing the tag size by a factor of 8. That's slow. Explain again how exactly this stuff is going to revolutionize seal use in warfare? Sakura raised her eyebrows. Naruto gave the researcher a scowl. After all, this wasn't the Holy Grail and Kabuto had lied. Well, a regular seal master can produce a maximum of 100 tags a day, right? Kabuto responded. 7th team gave a nod. With the exception of a few anomalies like Naruto, that was the global average. The blonde drew as many clones as he desired using the Kage Bunshin. At the height of the T-insurgency, there was a fierce interdepartmental battle between the operations and logistics departments over who would get their hands on him. With pride, Kabuto declared, this machine can print 8,000 a day, every day. Yes, that would definitely alter things, Sakura muttered, her shock palpable. I guess that means logistics won't be rationing the use of the bombs all that much anymore. It's not just shinobi. We've installed a release mechanism for the chakra that doesn't need chakra adepts to activate it, and don't even ask me how hard that was. I swear I aged a couple of decades before we overcame the technical hurdles. You mean anyone can use these tags? Anyone from the lowest recruit to the highest adept? Wow. Recalling Tsunade's 4-month victory milestone, Sasuke inquired, so I guess you'll be productionizing this printer in 2 months? Kabuto shook his head and laughed. There are plans to build a 4th and a 5th so that we'll have availability levels of 60+%. No. Production line for the seals started 2 weeks ago, and we've had 3 operational for the last week. Unfortunately, they have a tendency to break down frequently, a teething problems, you understand, and that one over there is under repair. We will have enough bombs in 2 months at the projected rate of use plus 30% for 1 division of samurai. We have enough for 2.5 divisions in 3. Naruto turned to his companions. I guess that means the mission to Kusa is go. Reluctantly, Sasuke and Sakura nodded. Itachi. Kisame. The 2 members of Akatsuki moved up. Yes, leader, Kisame said. Content to remain in the background unless there was murder to be committed. Itachi, as the de facto leader of their small group, asked. I want to go to Kusa with your team. The pickup from our agent at the usual drop location will be handled by you. Additionally, you will follow and watch the Toad Sanin's group as they operate behind Iwa lines. I'm hesitant to give you any more instructions because the situation is unstable and doing so could limit your ability to respond quickly. I will now provide you with the goals and limitations of your mission. Enhancement of the Hai no Kuni supply situation for the forces of Iwa's invasion. Limitations of the mission. Don't bother intervening if Iwa can solve the issue on their own. If not, step in and defuse the conflict. Remember, though, that we do not wish Jiraiya's group to be completely destroyed. Itachi gave a nod. It'll be done. I'm sorry again, Naruto, Kakashi said, placing his hands on the blonde's shoulders and staring into her eyes. Wasn't a thing you could do about this, Sensei, Naruto responded with solemnity. My life and my sacred honor for my country and my village. With a nod, Kakashi gave the blondes a hug. Good luck, he said to the 3 members of Team 7. Remember your directives. We need everyone to be aware of the person accountable for Kusa's devastation. Sakura wanted to strangle the Godem for what he demanded of Naruto, but she said, yes, sensei, trying not to glare at her instructor. Without a word or a backward glance at their teacher, Sasuke and Sakura followed Naruto as he silently called forth a toad and crawled into its gaping mouth. After the toad had jumped into the well and disappeared, Kakashi sighed, realizing that there was little chance of his students forgiving him for the incident. God, how he cursed the Sandaime and Jiraiya for putting him in charge of the village, something he did not appreciate. So, this is where we are, Naruto stated, pointing eastward across the countryside, and Kusagakure is 6 hours away that way. Could you not have leapt in more closely? Questioned Sasuke. After giving a chocolate gift to his toad friend in appreciation, Naruto turned to his friends when the summon disappeared. I could have, but I'm not in a hurry to earn the title of mass-murdering bastard, Uke. You could still refuse the mission, Naruto. And if I do, Sakura, how many of our friends and fellow citizens will perish? Buddha, we've had this conversation before and this is the only sure way. A moment's reflection. God, I wish I didn't have to do it, but there ain't a choice. There's a choice, Naruto, Sasuke said. But since you're too stubborn and pig-headed to change your mind, you're going to carry out Kakashi Sensei's mad order. Yes, I guess I am. Come on, let's go. Sakura kept glancing worriedly at her friend as they ran toward their goal. Damn Kakashi Sensei for making Naruto do this, Sakura exclaimed. Naruto had his clones out that afternoon, patrolling and guarding the approaches to their campsite, and Team 7 was as reasonably secure in enemy territory as possible, so she waited until their first break before trying again. Naruto. When Naruto looked up, Sasuke stepped in between the two of them. If you're going to try again to make him quit, Sakura, forget it, the Uchiha replied. He's not going to change his mind. That doesn't mean I can't try, she shot back, getting more forceful. What else can I do, Sasuke? She said in a more dejected tone. You cannot just shrug your shoulders, accept it, and go on living. The Uchiha met her challenge with a calm, I know, but added, I don't see any point in trying to persuade him otherwise. He's not going to stop. I recognize that you're upset because you can't carry this load by yourself, while he must. And I am, too. Sakura stayed mute and irritable. Let's make sure he doesn't have to carry the entire weight. Let's lend him all the assistance we can, alright? Stillness. Are you following me? Sasuke gave it another go. Yes, indeed. I agree with you, and all right. With a nod, Sasuke turned to face Naruto. So, what is our plan of action? He inquired. The blonde admitted, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd actually avoided thinking that far ahead. You understand, Naruto, that going in blindly will not end well for you. As the main supply and staging point for the invasion on this side of the border, Kusagakure will be crawling with Kusa and Iwa shinobi. Naruto fixed his gaze. He murmured, I know. Sakura nodded and took out the Kusagakure map that had been given to them. Stupid. Since you're uninterested, I suppose Sasuke and I have the duty to keep you alive. Sasuke gave a nod. He touched 3 hills on the map that bordered the city's east and south, saying, that means we'll have to take one of these 3 hills overlooking the city. You're going to need to be airborne or stand at a high enough point to target the city center, he said. I favor the one in the east. Situated 2 kilometers away from the city boundary, it is 1,200 feet above sea level. It's also the farthest from Konoha's boundaries, and getting there from the city is challenging. Will allow us to attack, seize control, prepare a defense, and allow Naruto to do his thing. All valid points, Sasuke replied, but see, the approach from our side isn't all that good either. All right. My perspective is that it really benefits us, Sakura inquired. How? Even though they are alert, the guards won't be observing this face too closely. Prior to the war, there was intelligence indicating that troops who misbehaved were given duty posts in the hills as a form of punishment. It is imperative to bear in mind that the front lines of the invasion force will be occupied by first-rate units. Third-class paratroopers with all the baggage that entails will be the guards on the mountain. Point. You and I will lead the assault from the front once we get to the foot of the hill. Naruto is going to trail behind. Once the summit has been cleared, we will locate the highest point with a direct view of the city and establish a stronghold while Naruto goes about his business. Naruto, you're going to need 10 minutes, right? Questioned Sasuke. Naruto gave a nod. On average, yes. Well, let's give it 20 minutes. Better to have a buffer than not, according to Sasuke. Sasuke, do you think we can put up with this nonsense for 20 minutes? Sakura questioned, her eyes flinting. Shouldn't be a problem. Come, let's eat and relax. It's now 2 hours away from the capital. We should have plenty of time to reach the goal and complete our plan if we begin at around 1:30 in the evening. The hill in front of Team 7 was completely dark, with clouds blocking out the moon and stars. While most people would have been blind from the darkness, Sasuke had his Sharingan, Sakura had her own unique means of seeing, and Naruto had his Sage techniques, which were equally effective. Although they could have reached the top of the hill in a few minutes if they had climbed as quickly as they could under the current circumstances, Sakura held up her hand with 3 fingers extended and closed them one by one. After she had made a fist, she brought it down and Team 7 launched themselves up the slopes, nimbly navigating the hazard posed by assorted rocks, boulders, trees, shrubs, and whatnot. When the kunoichi arrived, Sasuke was the first to reach the hilltop. He waited for them to join him by crouching behind a waist-high boulder and using his eyes to search for enemy patrols or guards at their posts. Sakura and Naruto joined him in this search. With a whisper, report, Sakura moved to stand directly behind the Uchiha. Wondering, Sasuke shook his head. I don't think so. They're all asleep, all 10 of them. No patrols or guards are present. May God protect us all from Grenadier. Be glad theirs are as bad as ours. Sakura shot back. Give us a couple of minutes and we'll clear the rabble, she told Naruto, referring to the awful state of readiness of garrison troops on the Kusa border that had allowed the Iwa-Kusa alliance to advance so quickly and far during their initial attack. Once one of us gives the all clear, come on over. With a nod, Naruto signaled his allies to take action. With growing rage, Jiraiya finished reading the message from Konoha and broke the scroll over his knee, hurling it to the ground and trampling on it for good measure. That wretched sob. When I return to Konoha, I'm going to wring his neck, he growled. Jiraiya-san. The XO inquired. Grounding his teeth and taking a deep breath to calm himself, the Toad Sannin told himself that this was not the place to lose one's temper, not in the midst of enemy territory with his subordinates nearby, but that he would speak with Kakashi as soon as he returned. I'm all right, XO, he replied. Just received a bit of unpalatable news from home, is all. Yes, sir. Combine the forces. The orders have changed. After all, we're not going to be fighting the Jinchuriki. Mister? Reaching down to pick up the scroll, Jiraiya explained, something else is being done to deal with the situation on this front in a more permanent manner. He lit the document with a fire technique and watched it carefully as it burned to ash. Yes, sir. Please bring a map for me. We will shift our mindset and realign to confront troops who are withdrawing from the front. The XO gazed in blankness. Our beloved Godem, Jiraiya finally managed to get out his explanation, has sent a unit to attack Kusagakure and cause great harm. That scroll served as a warning, outlining our new mission for us. The enemy troops will be ambushed by us as they withdraw to their rear. I'll get right on it, sir. I'm grateful. Dismissed, Jiraiya waved, knowing that he had the present and the near future to fight and survive in before there was hell to pay once he returned to Konoha. The 10 Kusa troops had died peacefully, never to wake from their sleep. Sakura's genjutsu had been so strong that not a single one of them had cried out as the two-leaf nin had methodically cut each of their throats. Sasuke had carried the cheap wooden cots up to the roof and set them up on the wall facing the city, and then it was just a matter of dumping 2 of the bodies and the mattresses from their bunks. You're all set, Naruto, declared Sasuke. You should move some distance then, the blonde responded. intent on finishing his task. He took out the necessary tools, one of which contained 1 kilogram of regular salt, another a specially designed rubber ball that held 100 liters of heavy water, D2O, and a third scroll containing seals that Naruto needed to regulate the process while he was powering the weapon. Retrieving a good 100 yards to Naruto's left and right, Sasuke and Sakura had been around the blonde since he was developing the technique, so they knew enough to stay far away. After making sure they were both safely away, Naruto began the protracted process by making the 7 clones he would need to control and aim the bomb. The clones took their positions, arranged the salt in the correct circle on the third scroll, and added the water ball on top. The procedure was dangerous enough without a wandering attention to complicate matters, but fortunately, he had a lot more control and understanding of the process than in the old days when he'd have slit his own throat rather than use a clone to power the process. Naruto sat before the control scroll, placed both his hands in the proper positions, and began pumping chakra. "That is what the fuck is." Pointing at the brilliant flashes of blue, green, pink, and other various colors on top of Fado Hill, one of the guards on the western gate of Kusagakur's wall questioned his team leader. The Junin gave a shrug. "Dado, damned if I know. It's likely that the jerks on duty are celebrating, setting things on fire, or experimenting with their chakra. God knows what goes through that screw-up's mind most days, and Nasu is with them today." "You believe so, sir?" Dado questioned unsurely. Once more, his commander shrugged. "Perhaps. Still, I had better call those thugs on the radio and tell them to stop while they're ahead. They support it if this reaches the watch commander." "Yes, sir." For more than 40 years, theoretical scientists had firmly established the theory of matter-energy equivalency. However, this particular line of inquiry had never been pursued because its implications could not be leveraged for military or economic gain. That hadn't stopped Naruto, though. The power of the homemade explosive device he'd used to foil Suna's Jinchuriki had piqued his interest in explosives, and he had excellent teachers in Jiraiya, Kabuto, Tsunade, and Sandaime who had directed and channeled his curiosity into useful directions. However, theory alone is insufficient. Theory must be applied to a machina, a weapon, in this case in order for it to be put into practice. Since Naruto was not skilled in mechanics and the elemental nations lacked the necessary mechanical expertise to create a device that used fusion, he had plenty of chakra, knew how to use seals, and most importantly, had the ability to learn by trial and error thanks to the use of Kage Bunshin. A staggering amount of mistakes had been made, leaving 200 square kilometers of land marked with craters from his missteps and essentially uninhabitable. However, he had survived to learn from his mistakes and he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams and by harnessing the power of Atomsa where others would have failed and been vaporized. "Sir, I don't think it's a party," Dado said to his superior, who was mucking around with the radio and swearing at inebriated, uncivilized fools who weren't doing their jobs right. "Mister?" Dado said again. "Yes?" The Junin turned to face Dado and followed the hand that indicated the hill to his subordinate. The surreal light show had come to an end, and in its place sat a single light strong enough to illuminate the night sky and shine on the hilltop like it was daybreak. "What the The idea was straightforward. Fusion in hydrogen can occur when pressure and temperature are high enough. Naruto had combined water and salt, centrifuged the mixture of rubber and dust particles, and then heated the mass using fire and lightning contained in a massive Rasengan to hydrolyze the water molecules. He had then followed that up with compression to greatly increase pressure and fed energy to heat the cocktail. Even so, energy leaked, and the discharged ions had been the source of the pre-lights that had startled Dado. Control, loads and loads of control, was needed to hold the plasma together. For that, there were 6 clones in the seal array. But at last, the procedure was finished. Gradually rising to his feet, Naruto wanted to get as far away from the bomb as possible since he was no longer in need of energy feeding. Sakura and Sasuke are behind the hill. Even as he sprinted down the slope, he yelled, "This is going to be messy." After ensuring that all 3 had safely hidden themselves, Naruto ordered his clones to fire the bomb, and the 7th one moved forward, aimed, and fired the ball at Kusagakur. This was possibly the riskiest part of the operation, as the plasma ball was on the verge of fusion and barely under control. Naruto was relieved that containment worked. 10 grams of matter were converted into energy equivalent to about 230 kilotons of TNT, and the ball destabilized with a temperature spike as the containment field collapsed, about 500 yards below ground level and 203 yards from the city center. The diameter of Kusa was between 4 and 8 kilometers. The city's center was destroyed, and the remaining parts of the city suffered greatly when the explosion caused a firestorm that, within the day, reduced almost all of the buildings to ashes. Although the buildings were sealed against fires, the heat from the explosion and the firestorm was too high for civilian seals, so everything that could burn, burned. The death toll was extremely high and continuing to rise. Naruto didn't join them, lost in his own nightmares, but Sakura and Sasuke toiled at the foot of the hill, etching a different version of the message. Konoha owned Kusa's ass on the hillside. From the rooftop of the building, Naruto watched the city burn beneath his knees and muttered, "Oh, I wish I had never been born. I wish I had died than caused this obscenity." Naruto. Sitting on one of the cots, the blonde stared blankly and silently. While a swarm of flies infested the interior, others buzzed around the building's entrance. The corpses inside had drawn them in. Sasuke placed his hand on his shoulder and gave him a mild shake. "Dawn's here, Naruto. We have to leave." Naruto didn't say anything but kept staring. Sasuke nibbled his lip. Not long after the explosion, Naruto had collapsed on the roof of the building where he'd fired his technique. He had lost consciousness due to the symbolic blood on his hands. His teammates had to carry him down because he hadn't replied or spoken since. The Uchiha pointed to his friend and said, "We have to leave, and in the state he's in, we're not going to be using Toad." Sakura said, "But where do we go from here? Not Konoha for sure. I don't want to see Kakashi Sensei right now." Sakura nodded and unfolded a map showing the nations of Elemental. "Quite. That leaves linking up with Jiraiya Sensei. We'll have to track him down behind enemy lines in the middle of a freaking war. At least, we know his unit's general area of operations." Sakura noted, "That's well over 1,000 square kilometers of area. We'd better start. You carry him for the first leg. I don't think he'll walk. Be alert. Every Saab within 50 miles is making a beeline for Kusa right now. Which is why you're going to carry him. We need to put some distance between ourselves and the city." Early in the morning, Jiraiya saw the sky light up and knew that the mission was accomplished. He had woken early to look at the northern skies because he had not slept well. He finished praying to the gods to preserve his godson and his friends, and then he started writing Kakashi a message. The Godem had to be notified as soon as possible of the successful detonation and, ideally, Kusa's destruction. Someone said, loud enough for Jiraiya to hear, "Did you see that light up north? I wonder what that was about." Jiraiya set aside the conversation to concentrate on his writing. After sunrise, he would convene a meeting and explain the significance of the light to his team. His people needed to sleep right now. "Kusa's destroyed," Zetsu told Madara, Pain, and Konan. The city blew up in a massive explosion. Konan asked, glancing at the other two, "Destroyed? What happened?" "I don't know." The Zetsu that was observing the city could not tell. Madara inquired, "How much of the city survives?" Then, from his perspective, he asked, "What is the status of the invasion's supply depot?" Which is a far more significant question. Nagato's actions in Tea would be in vain if Kusa was destroyed. His ultimate objectives would suffer if the balance shifted back to the center. The city's totaled. Very few houses were left standing and mostly on the periphery, and there's a crater where the center of the city used to be. The depot was caught in the explosion as well. It's not outright destroyed, but there'd be significant loss of inventory. "We have to assume it was an attack until proven otherwise," Nagato stated. Konan questioned, "Who has the ability to do such a thing? Other than Akatsuki, I mean." Konoha is the obvious suspect. Kusa was very high on their shit list, and if they had the capability, they would want a counter-demonstration to T, Madara stated. Nagato questioned, "Was it a tailed beast bomb?" If it had been, the Zetsu would have felt the chakra. He said he was lucky to have been facing away from the blast when it happened, or he would have been blinded, said Zetsu. "As long as you were sufficiently near," Nagato clarified. Madara questioned out loud, "What kind of weapon works on that scale without using chakra? Are we wrong in assuming Konoha's involved somehow? Let's not be too quick to rule out Leaf's involvement, and let's leave the mechanism of the explosion aside for the present." "Zetsu, where was your observation post?" "There's a hill about 5 kilometers west of the city walls. The clone was using that since it overlooked road used to move supplies and shinobi to the depot from Iwa." "Was anyone else on your hill?" "The Kusa garrison was, of course. There was no one else." "Are there any other high grounds close to the city?" If this were an attack, it was either a suicide run or someone had to have struck from somewhere high to be sure of hitting the city center. "There are 3 hills closer to the city that overlook another set of roads that connect to Hai no Kuni. All hills have observation posts on them, though the quality of the garrisons is very bad." "Anything else that could be serve the purpose?" "No, have the other scout the 3 hills. If this was a deliberate attack, There should have traces left behind. Conan questioned, what if the attack had originated in the air? You think Iwa is guilty, said Madara. No, I don't think they have anything to gain from wiping out Kusa at this juncture. Maybe after Konoha had been defeated, but not before. But they do have that flying technique and the attack may have been launched from the air. That is a remote possibility. Those techniques are closely guarded. But what one man invents, another can discover. Someone else may have figured out a way to replicate it. True, Nagato replied, but if they were using flight and Zetsu hadn't caught them, then there's no hope we'll find the culprit. Still, I don't think we should close the door on a natural calamity, Madara said. I quite agree. What are the usual suspects? Volcano and asteroid, Conan listed. If it was a volcano, it was unlike any other and it's possible it was an asteroid, said Zetsu. Conan glanced at Nagato. Asteroids could be natural or artificial. With a disturbed expression, Nagato questioned, you don't mean another Rinnegan user? Though it seemed improbable, the occurrence of a previous event could recur. Then why is there not a second Rinnegan user? Only, things were going to get dicey real quick if there was one and that person was working against Akatsuki. Why not? Inquired Conan. Why not indeed, Madara added. Did the Sharingan represent the only route to Rinnegan? This is getting us nowhere, he said, shaking his head. Let us not get ahead of ourselves here, Zetsu advised. Let my other self complete his search and report. Yes. Let's. Shikaku pondered, Naruto's strategy seems to have worked. Kakashi had given the Godime's War Council a copy of Jiraiya's Communiqua copyright as they convened. It would be helpful if we had confirmation from Naruto, Tsunade responded. Kakashi absent-mindedly nodded. The medic.nin asked, anything on your mind, Kakashi? I was thinking about my children. No reason why we shouldn't have received their message. You're worried something went wrong? Yeah, I'm worried. I'm sure nothing's happened to them, Kakashi. Even if something has, you can't help them from here. Best thing to do is to put them out of your mind for now. We have work to do and a war to oversee. With a sigh, Kakashi reclined in his chair. You're correct, of course. Where were we? I was saying it would be better if we had confirmation from Naruto before we proceed, Tsunade replied. Shikaku questioned, do we need the confirmation? Inoichi gave his friend a perplexed glance. Don't we? We can tell from Jiraiya Sama's report that the weapon is extremely powerful. It must be for the detonation to be seen so far away. It appears to be more powerful than any tailed beast bomb we've ever heard. It's clearly more powerful than the technique the Rinnegan user used on T-Capital, the strategist from Nara said. So who cares if Kusa survived the explosion or not? We have demonstrated that we have the ability to strike deep within enemy territory and that our weapon is to be feared like no other. Kakashi concurred, saying, you make some very valid points. Though he still had a boring appearance, his worries had subsided. However, we require Naruto to reiterate it. It seems that we have lost communication with him, Inoichi said, casting an apologetic glance at Kakashi. I'm sorry, Hokage. Sama. I'm sure he's fine, but we have to consider the worst, he said, addressing the Godem in particular. Numbly, Kakashi nodded. If he's lost, we'd be in a hopeless situation, Tsunade said, directing an apology towards Kakashi. Leaning forward, Shikaku placed his hands on the desk and shook his head. Not necessarily, he replied, we'd be in a hopeless position if Naruto's lost and it got out we can't replicate his technique. Inoichi gave a nod. You suggest we should posture as if we could. Yes. But not too strongly, of course. Tsunade inquired, what do you think we should do, Shikaku? We need to compose a message to Iwa and send it at the earliest. Let us avoid talking about the plight of Kusagakure since we don't have confirmation that the technique was used over the city. We will instead focus on the power of our weapon. Let them assume it was a demonstration if the weapon had missed the city, or let them tremble in fear at the destruction of that well-defended city in one strike. Either way, let them know terror. We will categorically state that the technique is reusable and we are very much prepared to use on however many cities we need to if they dare strike against another one of ours. Sounds good. We'll add that we expect Iwa to exert control over Akatsuki to our formal communication to the Tsuchikage and his daimyo. Yes. And once we get confirmation of the attack as well as Kusagakure's fate, we'll go public with our own people, proclaiming this as a great victory for the cause of justice, liberty and freedom. We should send messengers to the claimants to the daimyo throne in Hai no Kuni as well. A subtle threat to them to mend their ways, Inoichi stated. Speaking for the first time during the meeting, Ibiki said, I like that, with a horrifying smile on his face. I really like that. Tsuchikage. Sama, there's an emergency. With a look of exhaustion on his face, Sandame Tsuchikage Onoki looked up from his work in the late afternoon. In order to handle the growing volume of administrative paperwork and integrate the reports from the front lines, he worked through the night again yesterday. He was thus exhausted, bleary-eyed, and irritable. He yawned and asked, "What is it?" The assistant said, "It's Kusagakure, sir," with a thoughtful tone. The Tsuchikage sagged in his shoulders. For as long as he could remember, grass had been an annoyance in the form of an enemy. Once friends, one would think Stone and Grass's relationship and disposition would get better. Here, that would be incorrect. Kusa, the ally, was a daily pain in the ass because of his demands for resources, money, and other things. Onoki often wondered how Konoha had put up with the haughty country for so long. What are they complaining about now? Have their ambassador wait while I'm freshening up. Tell him I'm in a meeting in the meanwhile. It's not their ambassador, Tsuchikage, Sama. Then who is it? No one. There's a high priority message from Kusagakure. Onoki gave a headshake. He needed to fire this assistant for not getting to the point and get another. Well, get on with it. Kusagakure's gone, sir. What do you mean, gone? The city's destroyed in a gigantic explosion, so are most of our supplies stockpiled on the outskirts for the war effort. Tsuchikage gave a blink. Was there an attack? The message mentions no alarm. Our people at the scene suspect an accident or sabotage. The Tsuchikage poured himself a glass of water, worried about a tooth and thirsty. After taking one gulp, he turned to his helper. He held out his arm and said, "Give me the message." With a, "Yes, sir," the assistant held out the decrypted scroll. The Sandame Tsukikage took a minute to read and process the scanned report. So, to summarize this, he raised the scroll. "We don't know what happened to cause the explosion of the magnitude of which seems to have been many orders more than a Bijumari, and we don't know whether foul play is involved. Our people have started an investigation, but know nothing for certain. They're also assisting the survivors fight the firestorm that's raging through the ruins of the city. The death toll appears to be even greater than T-Capital's, and the optimistic estimation is that more than half the supplies stored at our depot were lost. Precious little of the city survives, so we've lost troops who'd been pulled from the front line and were being billeted in hotels and apartments there." "Yes, sir. The city was supposed to be proofed against fire with suppressant seals. How then this firestorm?" "Don't know, sir. I'll ask our people to investigate it. Send a movement alert to our troops on the front lines with orders to hold and not mount any further offensive operations until further notice. If we can supply the invasion, we can stand down later, but if not, I'd like to get our boys out ASAP. All right. Send a message to the senior officer on the ground to do an inventory of our supplies and submit a report on the viability of conducting offensive operations or defending our acquisitions within fire." With a nod, the assistant took note. "Call off all of today's meetings. Call for the ambassador of Kusagakure. The council as well. In 3 hours, we have a strategy meeting. Hopefully, by then, the situation will become more clear to us. I would prefer not to be bothered while I'm sleeping." "Yes, sir." Dismissed. When the call came from Akatsuki HQ, Itachi and Kisame had already crossed the border and infiltrated Kusa, finding a quiet place and calling home with their rings, marvels of the highest order of sealing techniques. Itachi thought, "Leader. Sama, Kisame and me reporting as directed." Pain and Zetsu briefly joined the conversation. "Kisame, Itachi. Your mission has been modified. Which mission parameters have changed?" "Zetsu is investigating the explosion that occurred over Kusagakure, and you are to meet him there, offer your support, and attempt to determine the type of weapon that was used." Kisame thought angrily, "Can't Kusa shinobi investigate? Why are we handholding them? He had better things to do than this kind of makeshift labor." The sharp response was, "Are your orders clear? Kusagakure has ceased to exist as of sunrise this morning." "Yes." Kisame thought back to leader. "Sama. Good. If Kusa's enemies caused the explosion, find them and apprehend them if you can, so we can either kill them or find out the weapon's secrets." "Indeed, leader." "Sama. Zetsu, work with Kisame and Itachi to coordinate." "Indeed." Kisame turned to Itachi as the connection broke. "Did I not put my foot in it?" he inquired. Itachi gave a nod, and Kisame chuckled lightly. "What do you think became of Kusa?" In an attempt to strike up a conversation with his partner, the swordsman questioned. "We don't have anything to form a hypothesis. All too real. However, Leaf is probably to blame." Itachi nodded. Since learning of the Sandame's murder and the attack on T, He had wanted to kill Pain because it threatened the two things he loved most in the world: his village and his brother. However, killing Pain would be useless as long as Madara and Akatsuki survived, and Itachi wasn't strong enough to take on Madara, Pain, and the other members of Akatsuki collectively, so he had controlled his rage and opted to be patient. The news of Kusa's destruction was sufficient compensation for his patience, as it indicated that Hai no Kuni's cause wasn't doomed. "They're the obvious suspects," he concurred. "It must be the nine-tailed Jinchuriki that did it, which means your brother is involved." Again, Itachi said, possibly acknowledging that Kisami's points made sense. "Itachi-san, are you not thrilled about the opportunity to meet your brother?" Kisame gruffly laughed and asked. "I bet he's eager to meet you." Leader Sama captured the perpetrators to discover the technique's secrets. "I wonder what he meant by that," he said, shifting the topic. "We will see. That was a very crude technique, and a tailed beast bomb, if my stupid little brother's teammate is involved. Being a Jinchuriki is the only prerequisite. Perhaps the boy learned how to modify it a bit." Kisame took a risk. Perhaps. After forcing Naruto to drink some of the water from his canteen, Sasuke sucked it down quickly and gave it to Sakura. He said, "This is thirsty work," as he wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "There's no doubt about it," Sakura concurred. "Wish we could have taken one of the regular trails. We daren't in the condition Naruto's in." "Obviously, you're correct. However, transporting Naruto across country is not an easy task." Sasuke, "This is better than him or us purchasing the farm. If you'd like, you can take a short break. I'll remain vigilant." "Yes. I only hope that we can see Jiraiya-sensei soon." "Me, too." This evening, Onoki was very caged, glaring at both his intelligence chief and assistant. "You mean the seals on the fire suppressants weren't real?" With anger, he questioned. "It seems the vast majority of seals supplied to the civilian houses were fakes, Tsuchikage Sama," the intelligence chief calmly stated. "Our people assisting the rescue and firefighting efforts in Kusagakure have confirmed this with numerous grass shinobi." "Explain." "This is what we think took place. As you are aware, Kusa was a state that Hai no Kuni had as a client, and in order to keep their ally status, Kusa needed to receive a sizable annual payment from Fire. This made it possible for Kusa's civilian and military leaders to enjoy opulent lifestyles while business was booming. The baksheesh levels have fallen in the last few years due to Fire Country's heavy commitment on multiple fronts and war preparations. Kusa's command was unwilling to give up their way of life, so they made defense compromises as well. The fire suppressant seals, which need to be changed yearly, were the first to go. It seems that they supplied genuine items to civilians while installing the real stuff on their military bases. Onoki gave a headshake. "That is bad. Similar problems have been experienced by our personnel when working in tandem with their Kusa counterparts. It's just that nobody gave it any thought prior to this firestorm. After all, that is how things are in the client states. I knew they have been having financial problems from the way their ambassador always whinges about money, but I did not think it was that bad." "Yes, Tsuchikage Sama. So, for the want of a few honest men, our war against the pricks in fire hangs in the balance," Onoki said with a sigh. "Sometimes I wonder whose side God is on." Zetsu smelled the sweet swell of ripening man flesh as he emerged from the earth in a cluster of trees and rocks 100 yards from the top of the hill. Yum, dinner was served. Zetsu searched the area for chakra signatures, but found none that were significant enough to point to an adept. He then carefully ascended the mountain and entered the observation post, where he smelled more strongly of decaying bodies as he got closer. Inside the building, he found 10 bodies, 2 of which were haphazardly sprawled, but it didn't take a genius to figure out that those ninja had been killed in their sleep and their bodies dumped because someone needed their cots. Zetsu's senses told him that the chakra used here had been unique, a mix of human and nature, and enough had been used to leave an indelible mark on the wood of the cot. After a few minutes of searching, he discovered the cots on the building roof, confirmed the attackers had been 3 in number, and noted the clear line of sight from the roof to the ruined city. Zetsu meant to discover what was causing this discrepancy. He went down on his knees to smell the wood, and that's when he noticed the pieces of rubber and salt on the cot in the ground. The attackers had used this position to fire their technique at the city, but there did not seem to be nearly enough chakra expended to account for the magnitude of the explosion. What's an explosion got to do with rubber and salt? With a suppressed cough, Onoki unfolded his scroll and grabbed his brush. "Shall we begin by calling the meeting to order?" "Well, what's on the itinerary?" he said. "We're to discuss the supply situation for the invasion, the state of Kusa and the message from Konoha," the assistant responded. All right, Onoki replied, glaring at his head of logistics. Do we have any updates from Kusa regarding the supply situation? An incomplete one, Tsuchikage. Sama. The Sandame gave a nod. Go on. I'll go over our current standing on a few things. Since these are estimates, there will inevitably be some error, but we can assume that the majority of these line items are accurate to within a 10% margin of error. 80% of the rations that were stocked at the depot have been lost. As part of our preparations for an offensive on Konoha proper, we have 15 days worth of rations piled close to the front, so this won't have a major immediate effect on our troops. Furthermore, our people have some limited foraging ability. Approximately 75% of our medicinal herb stocks have been lost. Our casualty rates will be significantly impacted by this once the front stock runs out. For now, it looks like our arrays of seals and explosive tags are mostly intact. Stores of chakra pills are also undamaged. To varying degrees, the stocks of wires, sandals, kunai, shuriken, uniforms, etc. are affected. The process of inventorying the damage and loss figures is still ongoing. The worst case scenario is that, until our production catches up with the losses, our troops will be stuck with somewhat inaccurate kunai and shuriken and tattered uniforms for the next 4 or 5 months. There weren't many survivors when the main donkey stable was caught in the blast's aftermath. Until we can make up for the losses, turnaround times for supplying units on the front will therefore skyrocket. Obviously, the largest problem is this. What recommendations do you have? Onoki inquired. For the time being, take donkeys and mules from merchant caravans. Ask Aim and Kei's no Kuni if we can purchase their beasts from them for a fair price. And what's the acceptable price in your opinion? The liaison of the daimyo inquired. The head of quarters shrugged. We don't get the donkeys, we'll have to pull 3 regiments from the front. The liaison gave a nod. So, what advice would you give? Onoki inquired. For 2 months, while we make up for the loss of the beasts of burden, supplies at the front will be limited. Now is not the time for retreat, in my opinion. While it will give fire time to organize their positions, we can temporarily reduce our offensive operations. Onoki scrawled something on his scroll. So be it, he said out loud. The state of Kusa? He asked his head of intelligence. Kusa is going to be a net liability for us. We estimate that they have lost half of their total force, along with their city and chain of command. Law and order issues will also arise from the approximately 15,000 refugees who are fleeing the city and entering the rest of the nation. That will need to be attended to by us. The majority of their troops are in the front lines, so it appears that we will be able to prevent a civil war, but we are unsure of how long we can keep them there. Other than seeking retribution, they have no reason to stay there. That won't even be sufficient because those men and women will want to go back and look for their surviving relatives. Additionally, there's the pay issue. At the moment, their bosses are pushing up daisies. What actions are available to us? We can start a program where we go out in search of the survivors and bring them back to their relatives who are either on the front lines or in other places. We have the option to pay them directly as well. Onoki gave a contemplative nod. I see us carrying it out for the rest of the conflict. We'll pay them according to their usual rates, not ours. Because I don't want a country full of bloodied veterans without leaders on our border once the conflict ends, we'll send orders to our commanders to use up the grass nin. Yes, Tsuchikage. Sama. Now, the matter of Konoha's message, the Sandame stated, casting a sidelong glance at his assistant. I'm relieved that's resolved. Could you read the communique copyright aloud to us? Chunin Yuto? I implore the remaining participants to wait to speak until they have read the entire message. With a nod, the assistant read, to the daimyo of Tsuchi no Kuni, our esteemed cousin, and his ruler, the Sandame Tsuchikage. There has never been an incident where either your nation or mine targeted civilian population centers as targets in and of itself, and glad were we all for it because it meant our wars were fought honorably and our families were safe at home. The turmoil between our nations has been long and bitter, spanning decades. But through those many years and the many wars we'd fought, our armies have always respected the laws of war. Samurai killed samurai and ninja killed ninja in our conflicts. Sadly, there have been violations of the laws of war in the ongoing battle. Cowardly attacks were made on the capital of T, which our daimyo claims as his domain. As they were being evacuated, thousands upon thousands of civilians were brutally killed with the intention of murder. The rogue organization Akatsuki, which has your support, is the agent of this act. Maybe they believed that we were defenseless and weak. We expected you to denounce their flagrant disregard for the laws of war, but you did not. We are not helpless and we are ready to exact revenge for the destruction of our cities, For every one of ours that is destroyed going forward, we will destroy 2 of yours and your allies. That being said, here we stand, and Hino Kuni has demonstrated a weapon in our arsenal in the land of Kusa that is as powerful as the one used by Akatsuki to level T capital. We beg you to put a stop to the rogue group Akatsuki. If you and they keep going in the same direction, there will be no winners in the war they want and the war we will give you. The Hokage Godem. What are your thoughts? Onoki inquired. The meeting broke down into anarchy, here at AIM capital. Madara, the other participant in this meeting, preferred hot sake over tea, and his first bowl was still half full, so Conan had to dump the cooled contents and fetch him another. Madara took a sip of her steaming hot tea and nodded toward her. The masked leader of Akatsuki was very particular about his tea. I'm concerned, declared Madara as he put the teacup back on the table, pushed it in Conan's direction, and took up a report that Conan had brought to the meeting. What's going on in Kusa? A mere 2 weeks after the initial explosion, Iwa and Kusa forces had retreated back into Kusa's border, abandoning their gains in Hai no Kuni. It was then either that or die on the vine. The explosion that had destroyed hidden grass had been confirmed to be of nuclear origin. It had also poisoned the land and ruined the supplies that had survived the initial explosion. Many of those poor folk had died a horrible death. Yes, that is one concern, Madara answered, but it's not the only one. It's too bad Iwa had to back off and give Konoha some space. The fact that Win's idiot daimyo gave up his nation to fire is even more regrettable. However, the fact that Konoha now possesses a weapon renders our preparations for Akatsuki pointless is what worries me the most. I don't know if I follow. Could you elaborate? Pain inquired. With Akatsuki, what is our ultimate objective? Conan exchanged a glance with Pain. World peace. That's accurate. Even though the other members of Akatsuki and I disagree with the means, we do agree on the ends and some prerequisites. One of them is the annihilation of the hidden village's power, particularly that of the 5 major shinobi powers. Yet, here we stand. Konoha has a doomsday weapon that is as powerful as anything we ever wanted to build. From the sparse intel we have on it, it seems that they can deploy the weapon anywhere and scale it as they want. Pain gave a nod. It's going to be a headache dealing with the fallout, I'll admit, but it's not the end of the world. I believe our plan can be salvaged yet. Then you're more hopeful than I am, Madara answered. The problem here is that Konoha has demonstrated that nuclear weapons are practical. No one knows right now how they managed it, but I bet you a million Ryu that the thought running through every daimyo's and Cage's mind is, how do I develop a similar capability? So, even if we gather all the Biju and build your doomsday weapon, it'll be just one among many and Akatsuki'll be just another player in the game. The status quo would not change, and where would that leave our plans for world peace? If the thing were easy, it would have been done a long time back, Pain replied. We need to get concrete intel on how Konoha built their weapon. Until then, we won't know for sure whether they can reproduce it as their propaganda claims, and if they can, then yes, my plan is moot. But that's why as contingencies, we have so many other plans, including the one you favor. And whatever happens, including the scenario where Konoha's weapon is reproducible and the other elemental nations can discover the mechanics themselves, we have a few years while they do. That gives us more than enough time to capture the Biju and execute our plans. Assuming that Konoha doesn't take us out. Yes, assuming Konoha or any of the other villages don't take us out, but I'm not too worried on that front. Even if we're unfortunate and Konoha wins this war, they'll need time to consolidate their gains and everyone else will be busy preparing for war. Certainly, all players will out of necessity step lightly until they're confident of their strength. Madara shut his eyes and considered the situation. After a long minute, he finally nodded in agreement. I still believe you're entirely too optimistic and that the events of the past few weeks are going to come back to haunt us. I'm especially worried that we're underestimating Konoha's probable response against Akatsuki for reducing their cities. If I'd known they had a similar capability, I wouldn't have ordered you to destroy their city as a terror weapon, but I did not and I did. Still, so long as the location of the statue is hidden and our control of AIM from getting out, I think we'll survive. Conan said, more tea? Yes, please, Madara said in response. And I'd like to have a bowl of sake for myself, Pain continued. With haste, Conan emptied their drinks and turned to face Madara. So, what do we do? There are several things we need to do, actually. Off the top of my mind, we must send Sasori into fire to gather intel on Konoha's weapon. Further, we need to start tracking the Jinchurikis as well as identify the locations of the 1 and 2 tails. We must ensure that whatever happens, AIM and Akatsuki's connection to AIM are not exposed. We also need Kakashi, It was good of you to find the time to meet us. We're grateful that you could clear your calendar in the middle of a war to hear our concerns, said Kaharu. Though it wasn't his decision to meet the former teammates and advisors of the late Sandame, Kakashi nodded amiably. He had been avoiding the meeting for the past 2 weeks, but there were only so many reasons one could give, and by now, his secretary had pretty much covered them all. My door is always open to Konoha's elders. Tea? Asked he. Homura responded for both, saying, actually, we prefer sake. Saying, sake it is. I'll have Kuno fetch them. Kakashi signaled his helper with the bell. At his summons, Chunin Kuno went into the Hokage's relaxation room, so called because it was an extension of their office, where the Hokage could go to unwind from the pressures of work or meet and greet influential and powerful people in a less formal setting. Yes, go dem. Sama. Please bring us 2 bowls of hot sake and green tea. Also send out a summons to Junin Commander Shikaku to join us at his convenience. The Chunin said, yes, sir, and pulled away. Kakashi nodded toward the window and the vast expanse outside before turning back to face his guests. It's a pleasant weather that we're having these last few days, isn't it? Asked the man. He was hoping to keep the conversation light-hearted by striking up a conversation with Shikaku first. Kaharu grinned. I much prefer the weather at this time of the year be a little less cloudy, but yes, the weather has been pleasant. They continued their small talk until a few minutes later, Shikaku showed up. The Nara's office, as Junin commander, was located down the hall. Before being called, he had been in the middle of a meeting himself. Shikaku, please be seated, Kakashi instructed. Elders Homura and Kaharu are here to air their concerns on the subject of Naruto's and Team 7's continued failure to return to the village. The Junin commander nodded, saying, I see, as though he had never heard of the topic before. He looked up at the 2 elderly people. Your boy destroyed Kusa 2 months ago, Kakashi, Homura said to the Godem. Why hasn't he and his teammates come home? Why aren't they responding to your orders? I appreciate your concern, Elder Homura, and I hope my explanation will go towards putting your fears to rest. Stop. The problem is that the demands of campaigning for the last 3 years running has pushed my kids to the brink. They're battle fatigued and the last 2 missions that I had assigned them didn't exactly help. It's my fault, I suppose, for not noticing the signs sooner, but fighting S-ranked criminals while operating alone in a hostile country where they were, for all practical purposes, abandoned did not help the issue. This was quickly followed by the late Sandame's death, their victory at Wind, and their mission to destroy Kusa. This combination of events and the stressful environment has broken the proverbial camel's back. Which is just a fancy way of saying your kids couldn't take it and they're AWOL. Do you even know where they are? Asked Kaharu. Kakashi gave Shikaku a look. As soon as Team 7 arrived at his camp, Jiraiya had mailed him, but it was preferable to have the Junin commander assuage the fears of the Sandame's comrades on that front. If he didn't tell them where Team 7 was right now, he doubted they would believe him. And if they did, they would be furious with him for letting his children stay at a camp that was encircled by enemy troops. We know where they are, elders. Their exact location is a secret, of course, but rest assured that we're getting daily updates about their status, replied the Nara. Kaharu leaned forward as Homura nodded. She inquired, and what is their status? Sasuke and Sakura are functional. Naruto is recovering. It might be another month or so before he can safely return to duty. This lull in fighting is a godsend for them and us. Can your boy do the same to another city should the need arise? Homura inquired. Or are there others who know the technique he used? Not in the condition he is right now, but yes, there's no physical reason why he shouldn't be able to do it to another city. Psychologically, we don't have the information to be sure. Whatever profile we had is ruined because of his current condition. I believe that he will, if asked, though he might require justification of our orders. As to whether the technique is usable by others, I believe so, elders. The technique is stored in our Forbidden Jutsu library, and while no one else knows it right now, given sufficient time, any reasonably skilled shinobi should be able to do it. Provided they can supply the chakra needed to fire the technique, of course. Homura and Kaharu exchanged quick looks before getting up from their chairs. That we can live with. Thanks again for sparing the time to listen to us, Kakashi. Kakashi rang up Kuno and asked the Chunin to show the 2 oldsters out. It was my pleasure, elders, he said pleasantly. He turned to Shikaku and yawned as he massaged his eyes after the door closed behind them. That should keep them happy for a week, I should think. A week and a half at most, I should think, the sardonic Nara retorted. Even he had dark bags under his eyes. Sobering, he continued. I would be a lot happier myself if Team 7 were somewhere inside our territory or at least not trapped in a camp surrounded by pissed off Iwa and Kusa Nin. So would I, said Kakashi, but I'm not sure Sasuke and Sakura will obey an order to move Naruto out of the camp if I gave it. Which is why I haven't ordered them. Shikaku questioned, you think we used up those kids? That would be tragic for the 3 teenagers in Konoha. Your life was wrecked by battle fatigue in your early teens, and the few nin who were affected were the ones who managed to prolong their lives instead of dying young. The personal tragedy was that Konoha could have used Team 7's abilities and skills, which only came around once every generation or so. Leaf's tragedy was that, based on the way things were going, it appeared as though those abilities were almost gone. Before one gave his life, another took control of the external intelligence network, and the remaining 2 were exhausted. At least the Sannin and the Yondaime had an opportunity to instruct the next generation. It appeared more and more likely from Shikaku's vantage point that Kakashi's students would not even get the chance. I hope not, sighed Kakashi. It'd be my fault entirely if they are. Needs of the war, Kakashi. Still, it is a damn shame. Kakashi gave a nod. You really think that someone else can master Naruto's technique? Replied Shikaku. The Godem answered, not an individual by himself, no, but a team working together should. After giving it some thought, Shikaku accepted the point. Very likely yes. How are the talks with Wind coming along? There's a lot of gnashing of teeth in their camp, right now. Unlike last time, however, we don't have our own internal troubles to export to them, and we're trying to strike a fair deal in the interests of securing peace in the long term, so they're cooperating. It helps that we hold so many hostages from their anti-Hai no Kuni faction. So long as the Wind border with us is stable, it's a good thing for us. Excellent, Kakashi agreed. My biggest headache these days is Danzo. Knowing about that compartment, Shikaku shook his head. The man is devoted to ensuring Konoha's supremacy, but has a one-track mind that can't see any path but the direct, he stated. Too bad he's a slave to his ambitions, and his ambition requires he sit in your seat. Kakashi admitted, I'm concerned about the support he has started to enjoy in Konoha again. The Nara said, you have more supporters, and more powerful ones at that. Quite. I'm not afraid of Danzo posing a direct challenge to the seat. I'm afraid that the support is going to make him even more of an idiot with respect to his ambition. Possibly. But since he and his unit are in Rice facing Kumo, their skills at assassination and ambushes are well suited for the campaign there. I'm sure its needs will keep him focused on the job at hand until we reach an arrangement with Kumo. With a peek, Kakashi inquired, afterwards, even though he already knew the solution, he couldn't help but become enraged at Danzo for his persistent ignorance regarding the Hokage's seat. Afterwards is afterwards. Danzo could die of natural causes or be killed by an assassin before we negotiate a peace with Kumo. If he survives, his troops are bound to be weakened with the order you've given Enko to use them up, and we can take him out. Covertly or overtly. If we have peace and we have to act openly, the loss of his unit shouldn't hurt our readiness levels all that much. Not with the way things are shaping up in T. Kakashi grinned when tea was brought up. After Leaf Nin's destruction of their capital and the heroic defense put up to prevent it, the nation that had been a pain in the ass for the previous 3 years was now overwhelmingly pro-Hai no Kuni. On that score, Akatsuki could not have messed up more. The Godem said, all right, Shikaku, I concede. I wanted to talk to you about our readiness for an offensive on the Kusa front as well. How are the supplies of Kabuto's wonder weapons? Naruto had poor skills in shogi. It was fortunate for him that his opponent wasn't a particularly skilled player. Naruto and his opponent both had the annoying habit of taking too long to plot their moves, which made the resulting game even worse. Still, in a besieged camp there was little to do. There was only one shogi board around, so even the cheesy game being played in the medical tent had drawn the attention of 6 recuperating shinobi with nothing better to do with their time. Jin, Naruto's skilled opponent, was convalescing from a mild case of chakra exhaustion. A few days earlier, while on a patrol, one of Iwa's Jinchurikis had ambushed his squad. They had brought their assailants to a complete halt and withdrew in a well-organized manner, avoiding any casualties. However, after a fair price was given to the Toads, one member had to be evacuated to Konoha due to severe burns. Jin was the only one who had sustained serious injuries. The others had only minor ones. By using the Jinchuriki, he had given the others enough time to react to the ambush. When the combined forces of Iwa and Kusa began their retreat to the grass border, the Toad Sannin had constructed a fortress on a small hill overlooking one of the 3 wagon-worthy roads to the front line. His plan had been to cut off a vital supply route to the front, which would have delayed the preparations for defense and troop build. Up, forcing the enemy to dedicate front line forces to maintaining security in the rear. Under normal circumstances, Jiraiya would not have attempted such a risky tactic because his unit was severely outnumbered and cut off from self-support, even though they posed a threat to a major supply line. However, when he made the choice, Leaf forces on the front had been thin and his unit consisted of skilled seals of power users who were also experienced blooded operators. In anticipation of Fire's initial attack on the Kusa front, the troops on the front had been heavily bolstered, and the Jiraiya's unit had gained 2 platoons of Leaf Anbu, which were experts in tracking and assassination. With the enemy in retreat, the Anbu had sneaked in through the front lines when it was still vulnerable. Not to be outdone, the enemy had set up 2 companies of elite Iwa and Kusa troops along the road, sensing the threat posed by Jiraiya's unit to the countryside around them. For the previous month and a half, there had been an average of 2 battles per week due to the aggressive patrolling by both sides. Up until now, the Leaf Nin had dealt out a disproportionate amount of damage and made Iwa remove one of their Jinchurikis from the front line. For his part, Naruto was indifferent to the strategic circumstances or the risks his allies were facing. Though the part of his brain that used to care seemed to have been switched off, he was aware that they were all in a dangerous situation. His attention was on his games these days. He was losing the game badly, so he was even more focused today. After destroying Kusa as instructed by his sensei, he hadn't talked much, if at all, for the first month. He would eat if someone fed him, and when he slept, it was a nightmare. Games, human company, and even Sasuke and Sakura had not pleased him. Now, 2 months had passed since the massacre, and he was gradually returning to normal. Even so, holding a kunai or shuriken in his hand still didn't feel right, but he only occasionally had terrible dreams and only woke up once or twice a night screaming. Considerably, this was a step up from the first month. Naruto said, "Your move, Jin," and proceeded to move a piece. He considered giving up the game because he was only 3 moves from losing, but if he did, the board would be taken by someone else, and he would have to wait for several hours to get it back. Could he perhaps place a wager for the upcoming game? Itachi looked at the map the Iwa captain had given him. The exquisitely crafted map offered only the most basic information about the terrain, pinpointing the locations where patrols from Iwa or Kusa had clashed with their Leaf counterparts over the past 1.5 months. He and Kisame had set up near a location where there had been 3 skirmishes to date and waited in ambush. The dates of the various encounters were neatly scribbled alongside the markings. There was no obvious pattern to the patrols, though. As of today, the ambush position has been occupied for 4 days, and not a single Leaf unit had ventured in to receive a shelling. This was nothing out of the norm as far as waiting in ambushes prepared goes. He and Kisame planned to wait a few more days, and if things didn't work out where they were now, they would move to a more likely ambush site and try their luck there. After all, they had all the time in the world, and all they needed to do to put Jiraiya's unit on the defensive was to destroy a Konoha squad once or twice. With a nod to those present, Sasuke moved the flap of the command post tent aside and entered. Sakura approached her teammate and took hold of the spoon and bowl of hot soup he was holding. Without protest, the Uchiha Saiyan gave up the dish. He was aware that Sakura was probably starving, having spent the most of the day preparing poisons and countermeasures. Jiraiya said, "Good of you to join us, Sasuke. We were discussing the route for a reinforced patrol that we want to use to spring an enemy ambush and annihilate their troops. I was hoping that you and Sakura would like to join the hunt." Sasuke gave a shrug. After being cooped up in the camp for a month, taking care of Naruto, he was looking forward to any potential battle. The teen with raven hair said, "I'm game. Don't know about Sakura though, as she's probably tired from working with chemicals," he said, glancing at his teammate. With a fierce, "I'm definitely in," the Haruno shot her friend a shady glance in response. He ought to have realized better than to doubt her preparedness for duty. With a sick smile, Sasuke gave the kunoichi an apologetic glance. He was aware that his error would cost him dearly in their upcoming battle. Jiraiya focused on the map spread out on the table, ignoring the byplay. He traced a line on the map and said, "This is the planned route for this patrol. This route was chosen by the squad leaders and me because it passes near 3 locations where there have already been several ambushes. Your operating instructions are straightforward. As you proceed, engage the enemy or spring the ambush if you come across an enemy unit or ambush. Take out the opposition and retreat with your injured and prisoners. After the first encounter, don't continue with the patrol. Retrace your steps in fighting order back to base if you are greatly outnumbered. We'll give it another go another day. Is that understood correctly?" "Yes, sir," came the unanimity response. After 30 minutes of their patrol, Sakura sensed the two strong, repressed chakras ambushed 100 yards ahead of them in the copse of trees that bordered their path. She gave the order to stop and informed the others of the enemy's likely numbers and disposition. "I'll take point," Sasuke muttered to the patrol commander. "Are you certain?" the man inquired. "Indeed. I'll enter wearing a genjutsu and my Sharingan active. I'll set up the trap so your group can launch a counter-offensive." In turn, the patrol leader faced Sakura. "I'll provide range support. I'm the camp's only competent medic and a master genjutsu practitioner. I'll take on a direct combatant role if necessary to address the situation." "All right. Get rid of your non-combatants, folks." After a drink, split up into two groups. The chakra signatures were coming in steadily, so Itachi tapped his sleeping partner's shoulders to wake him up and told Kisame that the patrol was stronger than a normal Konoha patrol. From then on, it was just a matter of waiting until the suspicious Leaf Nin entered the kill zone. To say that Itachi was taken aback when his younger brother entered the ambush zone a few minutes later would be an understatement. Sasuke and his group had vanished from sight a few months prior, but Akatsuki Command had only assumed they had been retreated for rest and recovery following their momentous and successful campaign in K's no Kuni. Even so, Itachi shunshined in front of Sasuke without warning Kisame, realizing that there was only one thing to do. "Hi there, younger sibling. What's up with you?" As he looked at his sibling, the elder Uchiha asked, his Sharingan spinning in a blur. A second later, Kisame appeared beside his teammate, looking miffed that this wasn't how the ambush was supposed to go. "Kisame," Itachi said before his partner could object. "I need to talk to my brother about something that has been waiting a long time. Could you make sure we're not disturbed and take care of the others?" With a chuckle, the blue-skinned swordsman hefted his sword and took a step forward, urging his victim along the way. "Little Leaf Nin, come out." Itachi's precise jab into his partner's neck severed his spinal cord, rendering further speech impossible. Kisami's sword screeched as its owner fell, forcing chakra into his body to begin the healing process, but no amount of healing could rebuild a severed spine as long as the blade remains lodged in the spinal column. Itachi said in a calm voice, "I'm glad that you finally know the truth about our clan, Sasuke," as his partner passed away at his feet. Sasuke approached his brother while gesturing to his allies to maintain their positions with an outstretched arm. "I forgive you your sins, big brother."
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.